Chapter 43.1 Thank you for your support. Let's return to the main base. 3 weeks had now passed since the search for Oiso. Haruki and Karen continued to spend their time leveling up in the Chikaho, the Sapporo dungeon. One of the reasons that they continued to go to Chikaho was because there were no traveling expenses. For a whole month, they didn't have to pay for rooms or food. There was no way they wouldn't take advantage of that. And unlike the garage dungeon, all kinds of adventurers would come to Chikaho. They would often encounter them while they were in the middle of fighting monsters, and so they had to be very careful to not show Haruki's skill board or Karen's magic. It was stressful. However, they had to get used to these kinds of situations, or it would come back to haunt them later. And so they purposely fought in places where there was a good chance of people coming. After 3 weeks of leveling, Haruki became strong enough that he could kill the monsters of Chikaho's 8th floor without a problem. Kurosaki Karen 18 Gender, Female. Skill Points, 02. Class, Spirit User, Hammer User. Vitality, Stamina 1-2. Natural Recovery 0-1. Strength 0-1. Magic Power 3. Magic Compatibility 2 updated from novel by End.com. Magic Manipulation 2-3. Agility, Quickness 0. Dexterity 0-1. Technique, Weapon Mastery, Blunt Weapon 0-1. Light Armor 0-1. Intuition, Detection 1. Special, Luck 1. It was probably because she exercised every night before going to bed. Karen had gained enough strength that she could now unleash her magic at full power without having her staff slam into her head. Furthermore, when she unleashed her most powerful magic, it wasn't huge like it used to be. This was because she could now control the strength and size of it. As for Haruki, Karaboshi Haruki 27 Gender, Male. Skill Point, 03. He had gained 3 skill points. It had probably gone up after the monster parade. You didn't receive points no matter how many monsters you killed. And the reason that it had gone up was likely because he killed that mysterious thing in the wall. Haruki couldn't think of any other explanation for it. However, you only received 1 point for hunting down a rare type. The only time he had gotten 3 points at once was when he beat the Stampede boss. Judging by that, was it possible that that thing was a monster that starts stampedes? That was what Haruki believed, but there was no way to find out. But he had 3 points. Regardless of the reason, he intended to make good use of them. As for the remaining tree, class, Swordmaster Hidden Swordmaster. Vitality, Stamina 3. Natural Recovery 02. Strength 3. Agility, Quickness 2-3. Dexterity 2-3. Technique, Weapon Mastery. One-handed Sword 3. Throwing 1-2. Light Armor 1-3. Kick 0-1 New. Conceal 1-2. Imitate 1-2. Intuition, Detection 2. Special, Growth Acceleration. Tame 0-1. It was a disaster. Conceal had gone up. This meant that the strength of Haruki's presence had plummeted. Even Karen would sometimes lose sight of him when he took her off the mask. For a moment, Haruki had to wage a horrible battle against his urge to raise Karen's detection skill immediately. However, the rational side of him was winning for now. Compared to Karen, Haruki's skills rose at a faster rate. Part of the reason was that he used a dagger, which meant more actions, and he also moved around more as the advance guard. However, the biggest reason was growth acceleration. That is what Haruki thought. He couldn't make any detailed comparisons, but since their growth rate was so different, the chances that it was an effect of growth acceleration was very high. As for his new skill, Kick, it was exactly what it sounded like. This had appeared due to him employing kicks during hunting. Once the skill appeared, the power of his kicks had shot up. That being said, a kick was a way of filling in the gap between attacks. He had no intention of putting points into it. Furthermore, his magic sword continued to evolve. It was already sharper than the Silver Wolf dagger, and the blade had a deeper curve to it as well. He looked forward to seeing how it would change in the future. And like Haruki and Karen, Ria was also showing growth. Ria 1 Gender, Female. Skill Point, 02. Class, Leaf Demon. Vitality, Stamina 0-1. Natural Recovery 0. Strength 2. Agility, Quickness 1. Dexterity 1-2. Technique, Weapon Mastery. Throwing 3. Intuition, Detection 0-1. Special, Treasure Chest 1-2. After gaining experience and raising his level, Haruki returned to K-Town. He was finally going to try and reach the central layer of the garage dungeon. If you became a medium-rank adventurer, that put you in the top 10%. Surely he would stick out if he was in the top 10% of adventurers. He would not allow Conceal 2 to win this battle. He tried to encourage himself. As he entered his property in order to park the car, Haruki noticed that 3 strange men were standing in front of the dungeon gate. He had never met these men before, though. There was something familiar about them, but he couldn't remember anything. Haruki felt a rush of anxiety as he jogged up to them. Did something happen? When he called out to them, the men all looked in his direction with expressions full of shock. Were they burglars? The suspicion entered his mind, but he pushed it away immediately. The men were all in their mid-20s, and their equipped weapons all had the Yaki logo. Like with many adventurers, they weren't even entry models. "Ah, are you the owner of this house?" "Yeah, it's Karaboshi." "Karaboshi? I see. It's been a while." In spite of him saying it's been a while, there was a question mark after the name. One thing was certain: they didn't think that it had been a while at all. But Haruki felt the same. He didn't even remember them. And so there was no need to be embarrassed about it. They should be more bold and honest. Didn't they know that being honest about things like that would be less hurtful in the end? "We participated in the defensive battle as part of the self-defense group." "Ah, I see. Thank you." "No, thank you. The truth is, we've been using this dungeon recently. We wanted to come and talk to you first, of course, but you weren't here." Chapter 43.2 I see. So, they had come here to use the garage dungeon while Haruki just happened to be Sapporo. The dungeons were managed by the country. Even if it was on your own property, you couldn't claim ownership of it. That being said, if it was on your property, you could prevent people from going inside. But Haruki had no intention of doing that. There would be no real benefit for him if he tried to keep it to himself. Free to use the dungeon. That being said, I'd prefer it if you didn't come in the middle of the night. Of course, we actually have jobs to do, and so we wouldn't come at night, as it would affect us the next day. Ha ha ha. So you figured out I was unemployed. In fact, Haruki was able to make a living as an adventurer, and so he wasn't exactly unemployed. However, there were very few people who were full-time adventurers. Most of them had a stable job and went adventuring during their spare time. "By the way, how far have you gone, Mr. Karaboshi?" "I've reached the 5th floor." "What about you guys?" "We're still on the 1st. The house centipedes are really hard and our armor." "Right. Well, keep trying." The house centipedes weren't lethal, and so they were great for people who wanted to learn how to deal with enemy attacks. On the other hand, their scratching attacks tended to wear down your armor. But these men were carrying great swords and bows, and they were part of the self-defense group. On top of that, they had defeated a stampede once. There was no way that they were so weak that they couldn't beat the house centipedes. The reason that they were staying on the 1st floor was because they wanted to continue to hunt without taking any damage. That being said, their job was to put themselves in danger in order to stop the monsters, and that wasn't a good fit for the house centipedes. It might be better for them to fight black raccoons instead. While he thought all of this, Haruki didn't think to give them any advice. He wasn't strong or important enough to make suggestions to other people. We'll be going in now. If we meet inside the dungeon, don't attack me by accident, okay?" "Yes." "Well, be careful." Haruki had meant it as a joke, but the men nodded with sober expressions. Why had they become so serious? Did they mean to actually attack him inside of the dungeon? Haruki had been attacked by Shikama and his men just recently, and so he couldn't help but feel uneasy about them. Once they went into the dungeon and could no longer feel Haruki's eyes on them, the men let out a deep sigh. "He'll never get used to seeing that mask. I feel like he'll get cursed too." "Yeah. Why does it look like it's floating in the air? He must be really good at erasing his presence." "What would be the point in doing that if he's wearing that mask?" "What if that mask is his body?" "That's possible." Sasamori, Takakura, and Ina had formed a team after the stampede. All 3 of them had adventurer licenses, but up until now, they weren't very active in the dungeons. The reason was simple: there was no dungeon that was close enough to them. They went to Chikaho once in a while, but it was still far and it cost money to travel there and back. Of course, there were some adventurers who didn't mind spending money to go on such expeditions. However, not all adventurers were that passionate. Some people had only become adventurers as a way of passing the time. In fact, such people were the majority, and these 3 were in that category. But now that a new dungeon had been created, and a stampede had occurred, they had decided to form a team. they would level up in the dungeon and hopefully gain enough power to be able to protect the town. However, they were currently struggling against the house centipedes on the first floor. That didn't mean they were incapable of killing them. It just meant they couldn't kill them without taking any damage. The house centipedes had long antennae and legs, and they were also very fast. And while the men fought with great swords and bows, they still got scratched. And when that happened, it wore out their armor. Maybe I should change to a short sword, Sasori muttered as he looked at his own great sword. Why is that? What's wrong with the great sword? Everything. Do you know that it basically has the same reach as the house centipede? You get scratched right when you swing, but at least you can do damage. Most of my arrows bounce off. Well, you don't get scratched in the process. At least, you'll still get scratched if you use a short sword. That was true. Sasori pouted. Still that's his name? Mr. Mask. Yes, Mr. Mask. Doesn't he hunt with daggers? Maybe it's more effective when fighting against house centipedes. You want to use a short sword just for dealing with the house centipedes? That's a bad idea. Don't you know that it will be hard to level up with a new weapon later on when you've already leveled up a lot? Also, I heard that once you reach the mid-range class, you can't change your weapon no matter how hard you try. Weapons that were made from dungeon materials were able to choose who wielded them. The first thing you needed to be chosen was the right level. The second was proficiency. It didn't matter how high your level was, you couldn't use weapon types that you had never used before. In that case, you might think that raising your proficiency would solve everything. But it was apparently difficult to raise once you were a mid-ranking adventurer. There was one possible reason for this. Unless you fought monsters that were stronger than you couldn't raise your proficiency enough to be chosen by the weapon. But when it came to monsters that were equally as strong as mid-rank adventurers, weapons that were made of earth materials, that anyone could use, did no damage. This was the reason that you couldn't change weapons after leveling up. Well, such were the rumors on the message boards. And so beginners were very careful when selecting their main weapon. The source of this content November L/N. They studied the experiences of their predecessors and chose weapons that were the most efficient. It was very apparent when you looked at the population of weapon wielders. What will you do if you reach the mid-rank and decide that you can't use the short sword anymore? You'll be done for, you know? Yes, we chose great swords and bows in order to avoid that. That's true. But when Sasori looked at Mr. Mask, he couldn't help but wonder. Maybe it's just me. Mr. Mask must be special. Perhaps he's not the kind of person you should try and emulate. Exactly. We should definitely aspire to be like Masatsugu or Shigeru instead. The dungeon wasn't so kind as to create loopholes for them. That was their conclusion. And with that, Sasori, Takakura, and Ina started to hunt the house centipedes. Now, how many pieces of armor would break today? Chapter 44.1 Let's harvest the purple monsters. After seeing the three adventurers walk away, Haruki headed to the prefab. When he opened the door, a terrible heat poured out. It was so hot. It was abnormally hot. Akin's shop was just a prefab. It had no insulation or air conditioning. Because of this, the summer heat and direct sunlight had raised the temperature of the place up like a sauna. However, Akin's expression was filled with confidence. But in the next second, her soul seemed to leave her body, and she looked towards the window. Was it because Haruki had opened the door, or was she just showing her true form? Her change in attitude was absurd. Hey, what? If you have no business here, could you get lost? This prefab is hot enough as it is. If people come inside without a reason, it will just get hotter. Don't you have anything else you should be saying to a customer? Haruki suppressed his annoyance. I was worried. Huh? I thought your presence had really become like air. Oh, sorry. That's exactly what it is. I see. Alright. If you were worried about me, I'll have to thank you, Haruki said as he took the magic bag from Karen. Then he roughly took out its contents. 10 minutes later. Ahahahaha. Why are you so mean to me? Air. The materials seemed to fill up the entire prefab. Akin was crying with abandon. The materials were from the silver wolves that they had continued to hunt on the 8th floor. They had killed owners as well, but you couldn't get any materials from them to sell. How many did you hunt? I think there's about 5,000 in all. Ah ha 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 ha. Air is going to destroy my business. Ha ha ha. I'm glad you appreciate it. I'm crying here. Akane ground her teeth loudly as she began to appraise the materials. That being said, even someone as capable as her would take time to get through 5,000 silver wolves worth of materials. And so Haruki left the prefab for now. He put his clothes and belongings in the house and then gave Mr. Kitora some gifts from Sapporo. When he returned, Akane was nearly finished. That's quick. It's because I'm doing it quickly. Akane quickly picked up the materials and separated them based on their condition. Was she really appraising them? It was so fast that it made him wonder. She really was impressive. In spite of the tears and runny nose, the quality of her work did not drop. In the first place, why do you even have so many materials? Why didn't you sell them in Sapporo? Well, I enjoy doing business with you. He wanted to sell them to Akane. He said this suggestively, and Akane started to work faster. I wanted to see how you would cry if I sold you a whole month's worth of materials all at once. Gra. Akane's speed dropped a little. When she was finished, Akane glared at the register screen with a pale face. And then the 5% bonus totalis. Speak up. The total is 3,055,500 yen. Take it all, you thief. Ah ha 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 ha, she said as she burst into tears once again. It was Haruki's turn to turn pale. He had not been expecting that number. As for Karen, she looked like she was about to faint. 3 million? Maybe you meant 2 million? I wish that I did. See, look for yourself, Akane shouted as she pointed around the store. There were 2 piles of skins that she had separated based on their condition. There were nearly 5,000. They looked like 2 mountains of snow. As for the fangs, she didn't even know how many there were. There was barely any space to stand. Haruki ignored Akane, who was glaring at him with all of her might. He pulled out his card. Even after splitting it with Karen, he received 1,520,000. 1,520,000 per person. He had never seen such a number, even with the bonus. Now he could buy powerful weapons. Oh, wait. He wouldn't be able to equip them. Still, what should he do? Maybe he could just buy one of the high-end series as motivation for leveling up. Haruki was feeling quite elated due to the amount of money. I know, Akane. What? She was probably thinking of her new life. With all this fur around, her eyes were white. I want some armor. The incident with Shikama and the others had ruined Karen's armor. She was currently just wearing a leather breastplate, and it would be a good to have something made especially for her. Also, Haruki was going to try and reach the center layers now, and so it would be good for him to have improved armor. Any requests? I want to reach the center layers within the year. For me, make everything but the breastplate, medal. But for Karen, make it everything. Is that alright? Haruki asked Karen with his eyes. While he started talks without her, Karen didn't seem to mind, and she just nodded. It seemed that mention of the center layers had made her feel motivated. Akane hummed merrily as her fingers slid through the air like she was a conductor. She knew that Haruki and Karen could hunt on the 8th floor of Chikaho, and she used that knowledge to imagine what kind of weapons and armor they would need. Very well, I'm going to do everything I can to get that money back. Fine. Do your worst. However, if you create anything that's half-assed, I'm not going to buy it. Alright? HMPH. Did you forget who you were talking to? I'll show you something you won't forget. Well, you better do it then. He waved his hand and left the prefab. If Haruki provoked her, Akane would do everything in her power to create great armor. She may just take all the money he made today back. However, Haruki didn't mind. Having lots of money was nice and everything, but there was no point in being stingy if you died. They rested quietly until the next day. It was then that Haruki returned to exploring the garage dungeon. He used the gate to reach the 5th floor so he could aim for the 6th novel by N.com. The 5th floor boss was a large silver wolf, like the one he had seen in Chikaho. They killed it quickly. As they had leveled up, they were able to hunt without much trouble. Once the boss was dead, the dungeon started to glow, which always happened during the first time. As for what had dropped, it was a large claw and a dark red stone. He knew what the claw was but wasn't what the stone was for. He would have to have Akane to appraise it later, and so he stored it in the magic bag. Then they went down to the 6th floor and activated the gate. From the 6th floor, there would be traps just like there was in Chikaho. However, unlike Chikaho, There was no grass growing here, so they didn't need to worry about missing the traps. Are the monsters on this floor also silver wolves? Who knows? This dungeon wasn't like Chikaho. In Chikaho, the monsters slowly got stronger, but here, it seemed like they alternated between getting stronger and then weaker. If that pattern continued, then they should be weak this time. Weak? Karen sounded like she was skeptical of Haruki's theory. Weren't the onions and potatoes weak? When he said the potatoes were weak, Ria suddenly reacted. She started smacking Haruki on the head with her leaves. Sorry, Karaboshi, you really are strange, huh? First, these onions. Karen raised her finger like she was a teacher. Karen as a teacher. It made him a little excited. Oh, she just glared at him. When you attack them, the stimulant is dispersed into the air as a gas, and it's impossible to avoid it. If you get even a little bit of it on you, you will not be able to stop crying. In other words, you are robbed of your eyesight. Karaboshi, can you fight without being able to see? The reason that you cried when cutting onions was that the substance that flew into the air was too stimulating. So if it touched your eye membrane, of course, you would cry. However, onions also stimulated your eyes through your nose membrane. That's why wearing goggles didn't help. That being said, there were a few ways of dealing with it. Chapter 44.2. Next, there are the potatoes. Karen didn't give Haruki enough time to start making excuses. You can't see them unless you get quite close to them. And if you don't notice that they are there, they will shoot their bullets at you. And everything will be over. Well, he couldn't argue with that. He had realized it as they hunted together. In no way are they weak. They may not seem too strong by themselves, but depending on the person, you might not be able to do anything to retaliate. I see. He had a vague idea of what Karen was trying to say. It wasn't that monsters on the even-numbered floors were weak. They were just special. It really depended on whether you were a good fit or not. If you were a good fit and were prepared, then they were incredibly easy to deal with. And so, stay on your guard. That's what Karen wanted to say. Alright, I get it. Sorry. Haruki admitted that he was at fault. Just a little. He had let his guard down a little. He level grinded in Chikaho and became stronger. There was no doubt about it. However, he wasn't so strong that he could enter a new floor with his guard down. After all, maybe a monster that just happened to be a bad fit for him would show up here. He had almost made a grave mistake. With a renewed resolve, Haruki returned to exploring the dungeon. After they had advanced a little, Haruki fell into a crouch. SHH. He signed to Karen to stop. Then he carefully looked ahead. What appeared was a purple blob. It had green leaves and purple veins, and large, heavy fruits. Its roots moved with skill as it walked on the ground. It was an eggplant. Just then, a fire lit in Haruki's eyes. The fires of a farmer during harvest season. Then he felt a light kick in the pants and he returned to himself. There was a single impressive eggplant in front of him now, and a stalk that was all cut up. What? Who did this? You did? Karen was glowering at him. Number. But he didn't remember anything. Are you that happy to get an eggplant? It's a vegetable, you know. It's rich in polyphenol, you know. Even before the stampede, Hokkaido production quantity of eggplants was the lowest in the entire country. And so after the stampedes, it became a rare food item. Of course, I would be happy. Haruki was dumbfounded by how uninterested Karen was about it. Pickled, boiled, grilled, deep-fried, tempura, fried with meat. You could do anything with eggplant, and it would be delicious. It was unforgivable blasphemy to defile such a delicious vegetable. Alright, I get it. But, could we keep going? Yes, let's hunt and move on. Yeah. Wait. Karen was about to put the eggplant in the magic bag, but Haruki stopped her. He had quickly grabbed her wrist. Don't touch the eggplant without thinking. Eggplants had thorns on the stem, and they were frighteningly sharp. You would easily get pricked if you touched it, and that was quite painful. Just looking at the thorns was not enough to prepare you for the kind of pain you would experience. Haruki had memories of an eggplant monster that charged towards him while using the eggplant as a shield. It was like a shield bash, and if you were hit by the shield bash, the thorns would get stuck inside of you. I think the thorns might have an ability that enhances the pain. Oh, I'll be careful then, Karen said as her cheeks flushed red. The way she stuttered was painfully charming. Could she tone it down a little? For some reason, Ria started to hit Haruki's head with her leaves. Please stop that soon. My head will cave in. They continued to look for eggplants as they made their way to the 7th floor. On the way, he became so absorbed by it, that Karen attacked the back of his butt with her magic. Ouch, maybe you should just be satisfied with what you can eat. Okay, sorry. However, thanks to Karen, they were able to reach the boss room. Had Haruki been left to his own devices, he would have spent the entire day gathering eggplants. The source of this content. November L/N. The 6th floor boss was a giant eggplant. It had 3 eggplants as shields, meaning extra defense on all 3 sides. And it was also quite fast. If he didn't keep moving, the shield bash would hit him directly. Haruki waited for his chance and then slashed at the eggplant. He almost hit the vines. But! The eggplant's shield blocked his dagger. It was so fast. The shields covered so much area. And just as the dagger touched the shield, what? Thorns shot out from the vines of the eggplant. The cone-shaped thorns went straight towards Haruki. So they shot out whenever you hit the eggplants. Haruki quickly retreated. At the same time, potato stones were fired, and they hit the thorns out of the air. As they had been fired instantly, it was incredibly impressive. Since Ria had fought with him in Chikaho, she had also leveled up quite a lot. Her abilities as fixed artillery had been raised. Go! As Haruki stood back, a giant ball of magic rushed past him. It slammed into the eggplant shields. It was Karen's magic. The boss pressed back with its shields. However, there was a loud snap, and the eggplant shield was blown away. The vines could not withstand the power of Karen's magic. Good. Haruki saw his opportunity and rushed forward. He wielded both daggers in his hands as he stabbed and slashed. It did not take long for the boss to lose all of its leaves and become naked. Then he slashed at the remaining stem. In a second, there was flickering. The boss was then absorbed into the dungeon and the lights stopped blinking. In the end, 2 materials floated to the surface. An eggplant. It was a stone that looked like eggplants, a milky white stone with purple mixed inside. It reminded him of the jadeite cabbages in the National Palace Museum. Haruki was mesmerized by its beauty. Is this a jewel? As he stared at it, Ria snatched it away from behind him. And she wasted no time stashing it into the dirt. Apparently, she liked it enough to put it into her treasure chest. Ria, you should say please first. Okay, HMPH. I don't know what you're talking about. My body just moved by itself, she seemed to say as she turned her nose away. Haruki glared at Ria obstinately. After a while, Ria gave in and lowered her head. Good. It would be fine if it was just him and Ria. He wouldn't mind if she took the beautiful stone away from him. However, Karen was there as well. He had to be polite around his friends. They had all defeated the boss together, so if you wanted something, they all had to discuss it. Sorry, Karen. I hope you don't mind that she took the eggplant stone. No, I don't mind at all. Now that Karen had given her permission, Haruki patted Ria's leaves consoling, and then he picked up the other item that had dropped. A vine? It's a vine. It was a vine that had been rolled up. It looked more like hemp rope than vines, but it was also very thin, and the surface was smooth. He had no idea what it could be used for. He would have to have Akane appraise it later. This eggplant monster. It seems like it's a good fit for people with ranged attacks. That's true. Not so good for advanced guards like me, though. It reacted to Haruki's attacks and shot thorns from its shield. He hadn't tested it, but the same thing would likely happen after a shield bash. The eggplant could attack while it protected itself. It was a dangerous enemy. Advanced guards would have trouble. However, it will be hard to fight it with ranged attacks too, you know. Really? It might be easy for you, because you use magic. But most adventurers would have to use bows for ranged attacks. Only a very skilled archer would be able to hit the stems with an arrow. On top of that, the eggplant stems were harder than those of a potato. If you didn't hit them perfectly in the middle, the arrow would just bounce right off. So using ranged weapons didn't automatically give you an advantage. Perhaps this floor was just a really good hunting ground for magic users? If it was, that would be super limiting. Maybe there is some trick I just have to figure out. There might be. The only enemy that really gave Haruki trouble was the boss with 3 shields. The rest of the enemies were all easy, so he didn't think there was any point in giving the boss much thought. Chapter 45.1 Let's harvest sweet monsters. They headed to the 7th floor and activated the gate. The 7th floor had silver wolves and owners. Well, that was Haruki's prediction, but he turned out to be wrong. Cluck. Chickens. Huh. They are chickens. No matter how you looked at it, the monster was a chicken. I think they were called Kick Kokos. What a cute name. Just the name. As the name implied, They were monsters with kicking attacks. They were similar to the killed rabbits, only they were much stronger. While they couldn't fly, they could use their wings to accelerate, and then they also used their wings to stop suddenly. Then their body would float up and they would unleash a succession of kicks. Haruki blocked the attacks with his 2 daggers. Heavy. The attacks were quite heavy. He couldn't understand where all of that energy was coming from, considering their size. However, they weren't that dangerous either. He realized this after just a tenth of a second of battle. It was actually weaker than the silver wolves on the 8th floor of Chikaho. Cluck! It couldn't keep up with Haruki's speed. While it hesitated, his dagger slashed through it. And just like that, the Koko's head was cut off easily. Good. Haruki started to carve up the corpse. He had eaten all kinds of meat, but it had been a while since he had chicken. He could boil it, deep fry it, grill it. Oh, and one must not forget the eggplants. What would he make for dinner? Haruki thought about it excitedly as he carefully cut up the meat. Yug. Karen covered her mouth behind him. In spite of all the hunting they did in Chikaho, she still wasn't used to seeing this kind of gore. Haruki's eyebrows narrowed while he was in the middle of butchering the thing. Cluck cluck. Bok bok. He heard the sounds echo. He looked in the direction that it was coming from, and then 2 kick Kokos appeared from the depths of the dungeon. They had red crests and were clearly angry. Karen, Ria. As soon as Haruki shouted, Karen and Ria began their ranged attacks. Potato stones and balls of white magic flew in the air. In the blink of an eye, the 2 Kokos were blown into little pieces. Ah, what a waste of food. Haruki felt so bad, and so he folded his hands together and prayed for their spirits. The source of this content: November LBN. The first thing you could get from the Koko was the meat. Then the crest. The meat went for 100 yen per kilogram at a minimum. That lowest price would happen if you didn't drain its blood properly or it wasn't in good condition. If you processed the meat carefully, it could sell for as much as 300 to 500 yen per kilogram. It also depended on the monster. There were some that went up to 1,000 yen per kilogram. It had something to do with the fat. The crest could be dried and used for medicine. While they were quite small, they sold for 1,000 yen each. It was the same as a killed rabbit's horn. After butchering the first Koko, Haruki moved the corpse of the one Ria and Karen had killed to the side. Sorry for not being able to eat you. They continued to gather chicken meat and crests as they made their way through the dungeon. The 7th floor's boss was a big Koko. It spread its wings menacingly as it waited for them to approach. It was a courageous pose that made it look more threatening. And it was this boss that Karen and Ria started to attack. Without any emotion, the poor boss became victim to their ranged attacks before it could even do anything. How sad. Haruki couldn't help but feel bad for the guy. He had met the wrong people today. As an air of melancholy hung in the air, the big Koko was absorbed into the dungeon. As it was their first time, the dungeon started to flicker. Then he picked up the materials that came out. It's a large crest and feather. What's this? The Koko's feathers were connected in the shape of a circle. He raised it in the air and inspected it, but he was still unable to figure out what it was. Was it useless? Karen, put this in the magic mag for me. Yes. The crest and when he tried to hand her the feathers, Karen let out a scream and pulled away. The circle of feathers fell lightly to the floor. Huh? What is it? Karaboshi. The thing is really heavy. Heavy? Haruki's eyebrows narrowed as he picked it up again. However, it did not feel heavy at all to him. Is it something you can equip? It might be, or maybe it's a magic tool. That's possible. Aside from weapons and armor, there were accessories with magic properties. And like weapons and armor, there was a very great variety of them in terms of features. As for strong ones, Bacon's ring was especially famous. It enhanced your muscles to twice their original strength. It was rumored that the reason he liked to take off his clothes so much was because he wanted to show off his chest and arm muscles now that they were bigger. As for the weaker accessories, they were things that slightly raise your arm strength, or you might get a little more experience. Much like the store in Sapporo, it was possible you wouldn't even notice the difference with some of them. If you got something on the upper floors, it was more likely to be in the latter category. Just to be sure, Haruki inspected the ring of feathers carefully and then put it around his head. Has anything changed? He tried moving his body. He thought that it was possible that something had changed, but it might have just been a placebo effect. He would have to have Akane inspect it later. Alright, let's move on. He noticed it as he looked up. For just a split second, Karen had been looking at him with an off-put expression. "What is it?" "Nothing." "Mr. Karaboshi, you really are amazing." Karen looked like she was trying to stop herself from frowning. He was wearing a mask that looked like it was cursed and had probably been worn by some shaman in an unknown land. And then he had a potato monster on his back. And now this mysterious ring of feathers had been added. This magic item matched Haruki's current equipment so well, especially the mask. It was almost horrifying. With just one addition, he had transformed into something else. He often talked about wanting to stick out more. But didn't he stick out enough already? If he wanted to stick out any more than he did now, he should just wrap himself up in Christmas lights. That's not true. Chapter 45.2. However, Haruki did not accept Karen's words. He wasn't amazing at all. His ability was closer to the bottom. That was how Haruki rated himself. Yes, he had improved greatly compared to where he started, but there's still much room to grow. According to the mid-ranking adventurers, you were suddenly on an entirely different level in terms of power. Many of them would probably laugh if they saw how strong he was now. As for high-ranking adventurers, there was no point in even speaking about it. And so he insisted that he had a long way to go. He wasn't trying to be modest. It was the truth. Haruki was not remotely satisfied with his current position. "I have to become stronger." "You want to go even further, huh?" "What?" The air between them was now very strange. It seemed like something wasn't quite clicking between them. Was it just him? "Of course, I have to become stronger." I see, because you are weak, Karaboshi." There was something about Karen's words that bothered Haruki. However, he also felt that it would best not to go digging too deep. Perhaps it was just him. He decided to leave it at that, and continue on forward. They activated the gate on the 8th floor. As he had been mapping the dungeon from the 6th to 7th floors, it had taken them quite some time to get through them. He looked at his watch and saw that it was already 4 o'clock. "Well, find out what kind of monsters are here, then we'll return to the surface." Very well. The 8th floor was also the highest floor they had reached back at Chikaho. And so they had to be more careful than ever. With his daggers in his hands, he moved through the passage. After a few minutes, a monster appeared in front of them. It had writhing vines and a heavy body. Its arms were spread wide, and he could see balls with a netted pattern hanging from them. "Those are..." Haruki leapt forward just as he realized what they were. The distance between him and the monster shrunk. However, the monster reacted as well. Just like the potato monsters, it fired bullets from its vines. Ratatatata. Tsk. He was barely able to dodge them. It was all he could do. Still, he dodged and understood. Was his body lighter? Maybe it was because of the feather accessory. It was as if he could now go just a little bit further than what was previously his limit. He felt he could slow down just a little and still be able to dodge the attacks. And so Haruki calmly overserved the enemy's movements and dodged. Unlike the potato monster, there was no movement when firing. Before he knew it, the bullets came flying. Still, as long as he dealt with it properly, he should be able to defeat it without a problem. Yes, Haruki was sure of it. "Here I go!" Haruki heard Karen's voice and he jumped to the side. In that instant, wind crushed and destroyed Atatan. There were the light sounds of bursting as the magic flew. It pierced through the monster's body. The impact of the magic caused the monster to lose its balance. Haruki didn't miss his opportunity. He moved in immediately and slashed at its body with his 2 daggers. The monster seemed to roar without making a sound. It went into convulsions for a moment before falling dead to the ground. Haruki kept his guard up as he approached the monster. Then he picked up one of the balls and carefully cut it in half and brought it to his mouth. Karaboshi. Once it was in his mouth, the intense sweetness of the fruit caused Haruki to tremble. "This melon is delicious." The monster that had appeared before them was a melon. Karaboshi. "What? Don't you think it's a little dangerous to keep shoving random things into your mouth?" "I won't know how it tastes like unless it's in my mouth, will I?" "And what are you going to do if it's poisonous?" "I can just spit it out." "Oh, this guy isn't living on planet Earth." That was what her cold eyes seemed to say. "You try it too, Karen." Fine." Haruki passed her a slice of the melon, and Karen brought it hesitantly to her mouth. And then, her eyes opened wide. They quickly became filled with tears. It's so sweet. Updated from novel by N.com, right? I feel like I'm eating sugar. Karen breathed heavily as she approached Haruki and snatched another piece of the melon away from him. It did not take long for the whole melon to disappear. Karen. Yes. Haruki and Karen looked at each other and nodded. The fire of farmers burned in their eyes. And like that, it was decided that they would be spending some more time hunting. The monsters on the 8th floor had two different types of melons, orange and green. The orange ones had a rich smell and sweetness to them, while the green ones had a refined fragrance and milder sweetness. I'm so stuffed. Yeah, we ate quite a lot. Their passion for gathering the melons was larger than their appetite. Had they had unlimited space in their stomachs, they might have continued hunting until morning. After their full stomachs had put out the farmer flames, Haruki and Karen came out of the dungeon. It was now very dark outside. We got both types of melons, as for today's share. As soon as he said this, Karen's eyes glimmered greedily. She had greatly preferred the melons with orange flesh. Yes, she wanted the orange melon. He understood that quite well. You can have half of the orange one. Will you let me take the green and the other food? Yes, of course. Apparently, Karen had no interest in the green melon, eggplants, or chicken meat. But they were all delicious. No. Perhaps she felt that if he kept them, he would cook something amazing for her. He took out the orange melon from Karen's magic bag and then cut it in half. Then he took the rest of the raw food ingredients. I'm thinking about making jam with this. Would you want some? Jam? Yes. Karen's voice echoed throughout the area. It was clear that she really liked these melons they had gathered. And yet, she had barely responded to the potatoes, eggplants, and chicken. In fact, she had had the aura of madman as she hunted the melons. She was faster than Haruki when it came to detecting them and hunting them down. Yes, greed could do that to a person. Haruki swore in his heart then, that he would never allow that to happen to him. Well, perhaps it was already too late. It was currently past closing time for Akon's store. And so Haruki decided to force the materials on her tomorrow. And with that, they separated. Haruki returned to his house and browsed the internet as he cut his melons. He took the orange one that was cut in half and scooped out the insides. Then he lightly mashed the flesh before returning it into the peels, and then he put it away in the freezer. As for the green melon, he took out the flesh and dumped it into a pot which he slowly heated. Once the moisture had evaporated and the texture thickened, it was complete. He put it in a container and let it cool off. Then he began to cook the eggplant on a grill. While he had already had his dessert today, this was the main dish. It was charcoal grilled eggplant. When he put it in his mouth, the soft insides flowed out. Sweet. It was so sweet. It was so delicious that Haruki nearly fainted with pleasure. I'm so happy to be alive. It had been a while since he had tasted this, and he couldn't help that tears were falling from his eyes. In spite of his stomach being full of melon, Haruki finished the whole plump eggplant as he cried. Chapter 46.1 Let's prepare to go to the center layer. The road to becoming a noticeable being. In the garage dungeon. Hello, Air Hero. It's been a while, but we explored the garage dungeon today. As we had already gone up to the 8th floor in Chikaho, we were able to travel from the 5th to the 8th floor at an incredible speed. And on the way, we found eggplants. I haven't had eggplant in a really long time. Greater than underscore. I grilled it and ate it. It was so sweet and juicy and delicious. And then we reached the 8th floor. The monster on the 8th floor was a melon. We considered going home, but ended up hunting so many of them. Greater than underscore. There were orange and green types of melons. I crushed the orange one and put it in the freezer. I'm going to turn it into sherbet. And I made jam out of the green one. I'm going to eat it with bread. Greater than underscore. I'm really looking forward to that. Tomorrow, we'll be heading to the 9th floor of the dungeon, and then we'll finally reach the center layer. In order to accomplish that, I have to get stronger and stronger. Greater than underscore. But I did a lot of leveling up today. Now, surely I've taken another step closer to my future of being noticeable, right? Crab butter, a thread to talk about Chikaho. 78 I'm hungry. 234 name, anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. I just saw Ariel coming out of Chikaho. They looked beaten up. 235 name, anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. The Ariel, didn't they go off to deal with a monster parade? 236 name, Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. Yeah, they must have tried, or maybe there was nothing they could do. 237 name. Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. It's probably both. Monster parades are not a good fit for popular weapons. Even Ariel would have trouble. 238 name. Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. I guess Masatsugu is the only one who could get through while using a popular weapon. Also, maybe Shigure. 239 name. Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. Yeah, among those with popular weapons. 240 name. Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. What do you mean by that? Who else could get through it? Maybe Bacon. 241 name. Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. Yeah, I think Bacon might be able to do it. But there are others too. You know, like that massive pervert who got through a monster parade and stampede. 242 name. Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. The masked guy. I think he used daggers. Those are good for monster parades. But it's hard to imagine being able to kill monsters with daggers. 243 name. Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. Masked guy. Number. I'm talking about the masked, monster carrying, tentacle guy. 244 name. Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. What a power-up. Is he a monster? I can't stop laughing. Lol. 245 name. Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. He's not a monster. He can talk. 246 name. Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. Some monsters can talk. 247 name. Keijamitsu. Hey. 248 name. Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. 247 Hi. Did you fail in the monster parade today? 249 name. Keijamitsu. 248. Totally. We're lucky that no one died. Follow current novels on Novelb. In. Com. 251 name. Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. Are you serious? I thought with monster parades, they scatter if you just leave them. Why did you go hunting? 252 name. Keijamitsu. There was a boss. It was gathering the weaker monsters. I doubt they would scatter. 253 name. Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. Seriously. Was it a precursor to a stampede then? 254 name. Keijamitsu. If left alone, it might turn into a stampede. 255 name. Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. That's dangerous. Haven't there been enough stampedes and monster parades recently? 256 name. Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. I think they are like volcanoes. There are seasons where they are more active. I've checked other local boards, and they are saying the same thing too. 257 name. Anonymous searching for crabs in Chikaho. 256 Damn. I didn't know that at all. So, what should we do? Arrest all the strong people in Shinjuku. 258 name. Keijamitsu. Well, just have to chip away at them. By the way, this monster-carrying tentacle mask guy. Tell me more. The next day, Haruki saw the same trio making their way to the dungeon in the early morning. It didn't seem like they were going to do anything in particular. They seemed normal, if not just a little nervous as they looked at the dungeon. Nothing about the way they looked suggested that they were about to cause trouble. They had helped protect this town as well. He didn't want to look at them suspiciously, and so Haruki observed them from far away. Without any suspicion, they checked their weapons calmly, and when that was finished, they went down into the dungeon. Apparently, they were struggling against the house centipedes on the first floor. How were they fighting them? Haruki was very curious about that. He had encountered quite a few adventurers while in the dungeons. However, he generally tried to avoid them. Even if you felt no hostility towards them, they would always be wary of people trying to steal their prey or materials. And so unless they were in danger, it was considered good manners to just keep your distance. Of course, that was mostly outside of Chikaho's first and second floor. And so Haruki did not have many opportunities to watch other adventurers fighting, and that's why he was curious. How did they fight the monsters? And so he followed after them. Of course, he wasn't wearing the mask. He had to erase his presence as he didn't want them to notice that he was there. Though, he kept conceal at a minimum so that the skill level didn't go up. After advancing for some time, the men encountered some house centipedes. They immediately prepared for battle. Their reaction was pretty quick. As Haruki watched them, he was impressed with their reaction speed. It was wonderful. He couldn't help but rate them highly. However, Once the battle actually started, he started to see their weaknesses. Their greatsword and bows only scratched the carapaces. The greatsword swung too wide. The arrows shot too slowly. It wasn't that their skill level was really low. They were putting up a decent fight with the house centipedes. However, as someone who had reached the 8th floor, Haruki couldn't help but notice their mistakes. So, this was the difference between adventurers who were on the 1st and 8th floors. Upon witnessing this unexpected difference for the first time, Haruki couldn't help but be surprised. Would he also look this sloppy to adventurers that worked on the center layers? This difference between the 1st and 8th floors. The difference between Haruki and the rankers would be even bigger. I still have a long way to go. He wouldn't look down on them or be proud of himself. In fact, he mostly just felt sadness about the gap between himself and the rankers. Chapter 46.2. As for how the three men were fighting, it was just as Haruki had expected. The man with the great sword would lure the house centipedes in, while the two men with the bows would unleash their arrows from behind. If things went well, it was a pretty stable formation. The formation and strategy were all textbook stuff, but they were trying to do it in their own way as well, and he could see the fruits of their efforts. However, that just wasn't enough to overwhelm the house centipedes. The guy with the greatsword couldn't continue to lure them, and that meant the two archers couldn't target it, and the result, the house centipede ended up moving around freely, and all three of the adventurers had their equipment scratched. Yeah. Haruki couldn't watch. He didn't feel like spectating while these men gradually showed more and more skin. If they continued to fight like this, they would start to grow slowly, and so for a little while longer, they would just have to bear being stripped by the house centipedes. Haruki cheered them on in his heart and then left the dungeon. As soon as Karen arrived, Haruki started to prepare to make breakfast. He baked the dough he had prepared and then took out the jam he had made. Then he put them on the table. Let's eat. They put their hands together in thanks to the lives they were about to consume. He put ample jam on the bread and stuffed it into his mouth. The bread was fragrant and the exquisite scent of the green melon went up his nostrils. Then the strong sweetness spread throughout his mouth. Follow current novels on Novelb.in. It's so good. The jam had turned out amazing. Even Karen seemed quite impressed with it. Tears fell from her eyes as she hiccuped. Still, she continued to fill her cheeks with bread. It did not take long for the bread and jam to disappear from the table. When the jam was gone, Haruki put the sherbet on the table. He had taken it out of the freezer right before they started eating. It had also turned out amazing. The texture of the frozen juices and the sweetness that had already started to melt, spread in your mouth in an instant. And the rich, orange flesh smelled wonderful. Karen shoveled sherbet down her throat so fast that she ended up holding her head and moaning. Eating something cold that fast could make your head hurt. She should pace herself better. Haruki wanted to tell her this, but he was too preoccupied with moving his own spoon. Both of them suffered temporary headaches, but they finished their melon sherbet all the same. We sure ate a lot. Yes. Haruki rubbed his stomach and sighed in ecstasy. As for Karen, she had a forlorn expression as she looked at the thin melon peel, which she had scraped to the absolute limit. He would make some more for her, as long as she would stop licking the spoon like that. We must hunt melons all day today. No. Karen was a lot more enthusiastic than he was anticipating. Did she want to eat more jam and sherbet, or was it that she already finished her share of the melon? As he stared silently at Karen, she averted her eyes uncomfortably. It seemed like it was the latter. Once they were finished cleaning up, they decided to head to the prefab. He would sell the materials they had acquired yesterday, and ask Akane to appraise the items. First, about the fangs from the 5th floor's boss. It's a silver wolf fang in a different size. As for this stone, congratulations, it's a magic tool. As it had looked like an ordinary stone, Haruki had not been expecting anything, and so he was all the more surprised. So, what kind of magic tool is it? It's a heat stone that emits heat when you hit it. You can adjust how strong it is depending on how you hit it. With a single one of this size, a single household could use it for about a year. A stone you could use for a cooking fire. That seemed quite useful, but it only lasted for 1 year. That's not impressive at all. Why do you say that? A fire that you can use for an entire year is nothing to sneeze at. You can cook as much as you want. When she said it like that, Haruki felt that she was right. Haruki sniffed. That being said, it's not exactly rare either. While they are quite a bit smaller, There are dungeons where these things can be mined. One of the more famous ones would be Nakasatsune. By the way, these things are actually more commonly used at weapon workshops, and not kitchens. They are useful when making and repairing weapons. They go for 10,000 yen per kilogram. Do you want to sell it? I'll use it myself. As it wasn't rare, he didn't see the point in passing it on to someone else. As Haruki liked to cook, it made more sense to just choose it himself. He would ask about how to use it later. And these vines from the 6th floor. That's 10,000 yen per meter. Huh? For that? No matter how he looked at it, it was just a normal vine. If it went for 10,000 yen per meter, that meant the whole coil would be 200,000 to 300,000 yen. What is that even used for? For bows. It's very durable, so it can be used for really strong weapons. I see. Bows were one of the more popular weapons. If it could be used for middle-class weapons too, then it was no surprise that it could cost so much. Now, the 7th floor. The large crest is the same as the normal ones. Right. And this feather necklace, well, first of all, I'm surprised you just put it on immediately. Is there a problem with it? No, thankfully. But what would you have done if it was cursed? But, it doesn't really look like it would be cursed, does it? All I'm saying is that you should be more careful. Akane sighed with exasperation. Are you stupid? She might as well have been asking that out loud. But I wasn't cursed, so I don't see what the big deal is. Yes. Of course. So, as for what it does, I think it raises your agility a little. That's a good one. But it's uncertain just how much it raises it. If you really want to know, I could have it sent to someone who can do a more detailed check. No, that's fine. It would be better to find out while I'm fighting. Then he sold all the monster materials together. Once all of the money was sent to the IK cards, Akane, who had been quiet up until then, smiled mischievously. Now, it's my turn. Hey, Karen. Let's go hunting. Wait. Hey, I said wait. Listen to what I have to tell you. Haruki only needed to pretend to leave the prefab to make Akane burst into tears. While she was the enemy, he pitied her. Chapter 47.1. Let's advance towards the central layer. What Akane showed Haruki was the armor she had ordered the other day, and the armor he had requested before. First, there was the Iyaki series werewolf dagger. As it used materials from monsters that appeared on the center layers, it was incredibly sharp. However, it was also a little heavy. It seemed like the weapon hadn't completely accepted Haruki yet. Still, it wasn't so heavy that he couldn't wield it without trouble. And he would likely get used to the weight quickly if he continued to fight with it. Currently, Haruki's weapons were the magic sword and the werewolf dagger. He had only used the silver wolf dagger for less than 2 months, but it was already time to retire it. It seemed like a bit of a waste, but there was no point in worrying about that when your own life was on the line. He also had new armor for his hands and legs. These were also Iyaki. As they were a rank up from his old armor, they seemed to fit his body much better. They had a better grip and could keep up with sudden changes in movement. Next was Karen. A centipede breastplate had been prepared for her. Akane had gone through the trouble of acquiring the same type for her. Like Haruki, she had new Iyaki armor for her hands and legs. And there was also a new robe that was made of werewolf fur. Furthermore, Akane had prepared a new bag for Haruki. While it was a bag, it was also part of the Iyaki series. It had a higher defense ability than a lot of armor. Now he could avoid unfortunate accidents, like the pot or the planter breaking. As Karen was the rear guard, she almost never got attacked directly, and so it was hard for her proficiency to be raised, which meant that her endurance was always going to be a weakness. But the centipede armor and werewolf robes meant that she could avoid being injured for the most part, even if she was hit. However, she found it a little difficult to move when they were equipped. She too had not reached the required level. Still, she was able to walk, so it wasn't so bad that she couldn't equip them at all. They would get lighter if leveled up a little, and so she would just have to bear it for now. All of the equipment was the middle-class Iyaki. They were relatively cheaper models, but he had still paid a decent price for everything. It was 3 million in all, and so all of the money he had wrenched from Akane's hands went right back to her. He could still hear Akane's high-pitched laugh ringing in his ears. But now it was his turn. He would take so much money from her that she would be left speechless. Haruki swore that he would do it. After doing a final inspection on their gear, Haruki and Karen headed to the gate. We'll be exploring the 9th floor today, but the melons. Next time, Karen did not hide her displeasure. It was rare for her to express so much emotion. However, he couldn't blame her. Ever since the first stampede, sweet foods like chocolate and ice cream had become rare. It was no wonder that a young woman like her would be so taken by this sudden reappearance of sweetness in her life. But you can go hunt melons if you want, huh? But I want to head to the 9th floor. After all, we're so close to reaching the center layer. Just a little further. The difference between a beginner and a mid-range adventurer was big. But he didn't know just where the differences lay. The Let's Be an Adventurer site didn't have that precise information. Maybe it's underscore? I think it's underscore. It was all vague stuff like that. However, the difference between adventurers who had stepped into the 10th floor and those who haven't was supposed to be huge. This had spread throughout the website as a plausible rumor. What changed? He would be able to find out very soon. He couldn't stop here. A short while ago, Haruki would have easily chosen to hunt down melons to his heart's content. However, he had seen the 3 men fighting this morning. Even though they were weak and their clothes were being torn apart, they fought bravely against the house centipedes. Witnessing them had reminded Haruki of how he had felt when he first acquired his adventurer's license. He had dreamed of the dungeons, of going on adventures, of being strong. Back then, his emotions had been so pure. Besides, he now had some new equipment. And so Haruki's passion for advancing through the dungeon was at an all-time peak. I'm sorry for being so selfish, Karen. Not at all. Yes, if we're going to aim for the center floor, we can't let ourselves get distracted. Thanks. It seemed that she now felt his passion. Visit novelbin.com for the best novel reading experience. And the same fighting spirit and will to reach the center floor now burned in her eyes. She nodded. Haruki and Karen used the gate to reach the 8th floor, and then they quickly made their way to the 9th floor. Of course, that meant they would have to face melons, but they couldn't spend too much time on them, and so they only gathered a moderate amount and continued to kill monsters and advance. Still, Karen was at least able to acquire enough for a snack. The boss on the 8th floor had vines with lots of melons hanging from them. If you got closer, seeds would shoot out from every direction, and as there were many nozzles and countless seeds, it would be incredibly difficult to dodge them. As he knew this, Haruki, Karen, and Ria decided to start and finish the battle with long-ranged attacks. Haruki used throw to cut off the leaves. Ria's bullets shredded the vines. And in the end, Karen's magic shot past Haruki and Ria, and blew away everything above the roots. Everything had gone according to plan. It was a good fight. The dungeon flickered. The boss was sucked into the ground. What it dropped were the vines that went for 10,000 yen per meter. And a melon. Again. Haruki looked annoyed as he picked up the fake melon that had been cut in half. From the seeds to the flesh and peels, everything was made with great detail. Chapter 47.2. Still, was creating fake food some kind of new trend among the bosses of this dungeon? While Haruki wondered about this, he picked up the vines as well. Just then, he felt a slight impact on his shoulder. Ria was waving her leaves behind him like she wanted to say something. You want it? Nod nod. Her leaves swayed a little hesitantly. Ria had clearly learned after Haruki had scolded her for taking the item the last time. Ria seems to want it. Are you fine with it, Karen? Yes. As Karen had given her permission, he quickly presented it to Ria. Ria picked up the melon and carefully buried it into the ground. Then she bowed. Thank you. That's what Haruki thought he heard as she swayed. How adorable. He lightly petted the leaf that was on his shoulder, and then they started to move towards the 9th floor. He activated the gate for the 9th floor and they started to explore. The first monster to appear was an anteater. The anteater stood up on its 2 legs in front of them and spread out its arms menacingly. Oh! Haruki could hear Cupid's arrow pierce in Karen's heart. Karen, it's a monster. You must not be fooled by its appearance. Yes, I know that, but it's so cute. You can't let your guard down or have sympathy just because it's cute. I mean, even I don't hold back when I have to fight the house centipedes. Eyes. Karen's chin had pulled back a little as if she had just realized something. He felt that the light had gone out of her eyes. What could be bothering her so much? The house centipedes were also adorable little characters, and yet he had still cut at them with everything he had. While this question still plagued him, Haruki did not hold back as he attacked the anteater. When he was close enough, The anteater attacked with its hands and tongue. It was frighteningly fast, and its movements were clean. Rhea shot 2 stones at once. Karen unleashed her magic and tried to stop it from moving. Now that the anteater was slower, Haruki slashed at it repeatedly. As the magic sword was sharper now, it easily cut open its skin, and then the werewolf blade opened its flesh. Updated from novel by N.com. Oh, Haruki was shocked by the power of it, but only for a second. He quickly switched gears and pushed forward. Yes, everything was just fine. The anteater was below an owner in battle. Of course, that didn't mean that it was weak. The owners were just overpowered for the floor they were on. Chikaho was the only dungeon where demi-humans appeared on the upper layers. Normally, they started to appear on the center layers. Still, it's amazing. The power of the werewolf dagger far exceeded what Haruki had imagined. That was Iyaki, a middle-class weapon made from materials from the center layers. As he admired the sharpness of the werewolf blade, he suddenly felt something eerie coming from the magic sword in his other hand. Yes, I know. I'll use you a lot. Don't worry. Haruki was able to defeat the anteater without ever being in danger. He then moved forward. After they had walked for some time, Karen raised her voice hesitantly. Huh? Is something wrong? There's just one thing I want to ask you. Karen's lips were quivering as if she were coming to a difficult decision. The nozzle that Rhea uses to fire bullets. There are 2 of them now. Huh? It took her bringing it up for Haruki to realize it. And indeed, Karen was right. The thick vine that came out of her body there were now 2 attack nozzles instead of just 1. She must have been happy to be the center of attention. Rhea raised the 2 nozzles into the air as if to say, "Ta-da, that's so cool, Rhea. I'm jealous." Number. Should that really be your only reaction? What else can I say? She suddenly has an extra nozzle. Isn't that strange? Is it? Haruki tilted his head. Rhea grows too. You know, Rhea was a plant. So it wasn't strange at all. Never mind. Karen's mouth had dropped open, but she closed it and gulped as if she had swallowed a stone. Then she nodded. This was just business as usual for this guy. There was something about her right now that smelled of defeat. Perhaps Rhea's skills had changed after her body had grown. Thinking this, Haruki took out the skill board. Rhea 0 gender, female. Skill point, 2-3. Class, Leaf Demon, dual wielding Leaf Demon. Vitality, Stamina 1, Natural Recovery 0, Strength, Strength 2, Agility, Quickness 1, Dexterity 2, Technique, Weapon Mastery, Throwing, Dual Throw 0, New, Intuition, Detection 1, Special, Treasure Chest 2. Rhea's ability had branched out, so that can happen even at skill level 3. It clearly had to do with the nozzle, but he wasn't sure why a new one had appeared. As for things he had done before it increased, they had killed the boss and stored the items. Either it increased when her level did, or maybe her body grew when the mysterious items that the monster dropped were stored in the treasure chest. Haruki's instincts told him it was the latter. In that case, what would Rhea turn into if she kept collecting the dropped items? He was very curious. However, Rhea was very picky. They had fought many monsters and picked up many items, but so far, Rhea had only liked the potatoes, magic stone, eggplant, and melon. Everything else was of no interest to her, and so it would be difficult to continue presenting her with these rare items. He very much wanted to see her final form. However, that would have to be saved for the distant future. He had no choice but to slowly watch her growth. However, now I know that skills can branch out like that at any time. That meant there was a chance that a unique skill like Masatsu's Holy Sword could be unlocked to Haruki one day. Just knowing that was pretty huge. And so he had just a little hope that that would happen for him, and it made his motivation shoot through the roof. Haruki felt his body grow warm. Yes, this was great. As Haruki headed for the boss room, he wished for a skill to branch out, and if it were to happen, I want a presence boosting skill. Please give me a presence boosting skill, and so he dreamed of the day that such a skill would appear. Chapter 48.1 Let's be victorious against the Central Layer Gatekeeper. Exploration of the 9th layer had all but finished. There was just one room left. Haruki and Karen were standing as far away from the room as they could while still being able to see it. As this was the floor where the anteaters appeared, Haruki expected there to be a large anteater boss. However, what he saw now was a little different from that. The thing that stood in the boss room was a humanoid monster with an anteater head. It was a demi-human called a Barobaro. It was 2 meters tall. Its body was slender and it walked on 2 legs. And there was a spear in its hand. Out of all the monsters that Haruki had fought, none of them had been armed with a weapon. So this one was different from all previous monsters. But perhaps he should have expected nothing less from the gatekeeper of the central layer. It looks strong. Haruki felt a chill go down his spine. They were probably still too far away for the boss to have noticed them. However, he still couldn't see an opening for an attack. Did it know that they were there, or was it just so strong that it never let its guard down? Please be the latter, Haruki said with a grin. The thought of a powerful enemy made him shiver with expectation. As for Karen, she looked scared as she stood next to him and watched the boss. This was the boss for the 9th floor, and as it was guarding the central layer, it looked very strong. And even though they still had this distance between them, its strength was tangible. I'm scared. That's what Karen thought. What she was feeling now was a lot like what she felt when she was abandoned at the monster parade. It was probably because there was that much a difference in strength between her and the boss. Still, they had to keep going forward. The adventure must go on. If she continued to be scared by the power of an enemy, she would never be able to escape being the same weak Karen. Let's go then. Yes. Haruki finished checking his equipment and started to heighten his concentration. This time, they wouldn't shoot from outside of the room at all. That probably wouldn't work. Haruki couldn't imagine a scenario where every unleashed bullet wasn't easily blocked. Unless the enemy had an opening, then ranged attacks would not hit him. And so the first thing to do was to cut in deeply. He had to go to the deep stream of concentration. Fall and dive! Exclamation mark. Haruki jumped out with all of his might. The boss immediately noticed him. The boss held his spear ready, and then it grinned. Haruki shuddered. 20, 10, 5. The distance between them vanished and their weapons clashed. Their arm strength was comparable. However, the difference in height and weight was too big. And there was also a difference in skill. And so Haruki was pushed back. However, he did not panic. He allowed himself to rise into the air every time he was hit, as a way of killing some of the force of the enemy's attacks. But before he could enter his next attack stance, the boss moved his spear. The raised spear swung downward over Haruki's head. He parried it to the side with his dagger and then used his magic sword to aim for the boss' throat. The boss moved quickly. He turned his wrists and then thrust. So fast. Haruki put the brakes on the legs that had been moving forward. The soles of his shoes screamed. His body creaked. This chapter is updated by NovemberElbin.com. The spear went right past Haruki's eyes. A cold sweat poured from his skin as he heard the sound of the blade cutting through the air. He would surely have been defeated if that thrust had hit him now. That's how powerful it was. He could feel it from the sound. He stepped away before the follow-up attack could come. Haruki was now out of the boss range. It had only been a short exchange, but it was enough to feel his opponent's power. If he fought without thinking, he would lose. This was not someone you could just push your way through. He had to concentrate, condense, observe, imagine, predict, and test. Find out everything about them and block every attack, and then exceed your opponent's violence. And so Haruki attacked the boss relentlessly. But the boss moved its spear swiftly and blocked every attack. If Haruki pushed too far in, a sharp counterattack would force him to retreat. That being said, he couldn't be a spectator either. The boss would immediately take advantage of it if he slowed down. Good. This was very good. Haruki laughed. It had been a while since he faced such a strong enemy. It had been a while since he went all out. He had to use all of his abilities to the very limit. And even then, he didn't reach the boss. But Ria would make up for that. Her potato stones blocked all of the attacks that he could not. Just then, Ria hit him hard on the shoulder. Haruki frantically jumped back, and then he fled from the area. Beside Haruki, a thick, white, swirling mass passed by. It hit the boss' spear. She must have been charging it for a while. Her magic was strong enough to blow away an owner. However, while it did make the boss' feet slide a little, it did little else. Glare. The hateful eyes moved away from Haruki and towards Karen. It ignored Haruki now and moved towards her. This was bad. Karen wouldn't be able to block the boss' attacks. Haruki frantically began to move. He dashed towards Karen as fast as he could. However, The boss had started to move at the same time. Ria, she must have read his mind because she immediately began to fire at the boss. Though, it must have decided that she wasn't a threat because the boss didn't even try to dodge the potato stones. It didn't mind being hit. Karen was almost within range of the boss now. But before that, Haruki picked up Karen and dashed out of the room. He kept running for at least 100 meters. Once he saw that the boss wasn't chasing them, he slowed down. Then he turned around and confirmed that they had escaped, and he let out a great sigh of relief. Haruki collapsed on the ground and his shoulders heaved up and down while he caught his breath. That was close. Judging by the boss' movements, it had been a very dangerous situation. Up until now, a monster had never rushed past Haruki like that. Or even if they tried, Karen and Ria's attacks would have been enough to kill it. But the Barobero was different. It had rushed towards Karen at the same speed as Haruki, and Ria's attacks had done nothing. No matter how high the defense ability of her armor was, Karen was the rear guard, and she could not stop that level of damage. Had Haruki not been able to save her back there, she would have been gravely wounded. If our old tactics for fighting bosses won't work here, that will make things really tough. They would have to alter their tactics in order to beat this enemy. Keeping the enemy's attention on him would be important. As Karen's magic was so powerful, it just took one hit for her to become the main target. Maybe it would be better for her to lower its force and attack multiple times instead. No, maybe we just need to level up a little. There hadn't been much of a difference in power with this boss. It was the same as Haruki. Maybe just a little stronger. In that case, it would be a good to level up so that they were strong enough to overwhelm the boss. Fighting strong enemies was entertaining for him, but it would all be over if he died in the process. What? While Haruki had been thinking, Karen was biting her lip as if she was in pain. In fact, it looked as if there were tears in her eyes. Chapter 48.2 Are you hurt? No. Karen hesitated for a moment and took in a few deep breaths. Then her face turned red and, Karaboshi, why did you save me? Am I that unreliable to you? Did you think that I couldn't deal with the attack back there? No. Why wouldn't I move while considering the worst case scenario? But, aren't we supposed to be a team? I see you as a comrade. Then why did you save me when I was in the best possible condition? She broke down there. Karen could hold the tears back no longer. Karen and Haruki were a team. That is what she had believed. The source of this content November L/N. However, if that were true, would he treat her like this? Were they a team just because they could synchronize? Haruki was always kind to her. They had not even known each other in Chikaho, but he had helped her level up. Of course, Karen and Haruki were not a couple. They weren't family. They may not even be close friends. However, she had wanted to believe they were a team. She had forced her way into the dungeon at his house and gone leveling up with him. She had taken his valuable time. Furthermore, she became drunk on the power she had gained through the skill board in Chikaho, and that had resulted in her failure. When she thought back on it, had she ever succeeded in anything? She had done nothing but fail ever since she became an adventurer. And so she was well aware of how shameless she might sound to want more. However, she could not help it. Haruki had ignored her moment and swept her away. Was she fated to always be an obstacle for him? I have done nothing but fail. Perhaps I would have ended up failing again. I know that you don't trust me. But, Karaboshi, I want to go on an adventure too. I want to do it with you. Please let me, Karen said with a bow of her head. Please believe in me. All the heated emotions that had been kept away now burst out of her. She immediately started to shake. What if he rejected her? It would be the end of everything. It showed on her face. What should I do? However, Haruki nodded. He was listening to her. The end that she had been dreading now vanished, and her body felt warm again. Karen wiped away her tears with her sleeve. Let me fight freely, huh? Please don't worry about me. You should fight as if I am not there. But Karen, I will handle myself, Karen said resolutely. She did not want to continue to walk down a safe path that he had prepared for her. She would adapt to each battle and make her own path, with Karaboshi Haruki as comrades. So he had to trust her. Haruki listened to this and closed his eyes for a while. What he was thinking about the most was what Karen had said about the best situation. It had been the worst situation for him. So why was it the best for her? 10 seconds. 20 seconds. He played the fight back in his head. A storm of murderous rage and violence, and in that, he saw a bright path. He hadn't seen it before. No, maybe he had seen it but he had ignored it. The best path. Alright, I'll leave it to you, Karen. Yes. She smiled brightly. Still, there was awkwardness there. She was still nervous. Haruki knew what Karen was like when she first came to this dungeon. He had seen so much of her when she was weak. Maybe she would break if pushed too far. Maybe she would fail and be badly injured. Such worries constantly entered his mind. Haruki didn't want her to be injured if he could help it, and so he had ignored that it was the best situation and saved her. But Karen had said it now. She wanted to be on an adventure. By thinking about her safety so much, Haruki was becoming overprotective. He was taking that chance away from her. And by doing so, he was largely limiting his own combat methods as well. Realizing this and being sorry for it was the reason that Haruki decided to follow her suggestion. They checked their equipment again and prepared. Karen was especially careful. When they were finished, they nodded to each other. All right, let's try again, they said together. And then Haruki ran forward at full speed. He wouldn't think about Karen anymore. He would just think about the monster, about defeating the boss. This time, the boss attacked as soon as he stepped foot into the room. It immediately swung its weapon at him. Haruki dodged the first attack. He went around and attacked from the back. But he was too slow. The boss blocked him easily. Concentrate. Concentrate more. Don't miss the attacks. The change, the signs. Haruki dug even deeper. He headed to the limits of his concentration. With his two daggers, he blocked the boss spear. Sometimes the boss tongue would fly out of its mouth and attack him. Due to this, Haruki was forced to stay on the defensive. The boss was stronger, but when it came to speed, Haruki had the upper hand. He was managing it. However, he could not launch any counterattacks. The reason that it became a one-sided defensive battle was because he lacked something. What did he lack? What was it? This. As their blades clashed, Haruki thought about this dilemma. Then his lips curled and he laughed. Just then, Ataan. The boss head moved to the side. It was Karen's magic. And then the boss' attention moved towards her. For a second, Haruki too was distracted by thoughts of Karen. However, with a strong will, he ignored those reflexes. It was this. This was the time. He decided. Haruki turned conceal on, and he melted into the air. The opponent he had been facing had vanished. The boss noticed this and there was a short moment of hesitation. Too slow. Haruki laughed. As the boss headed towards Karen, Haruki threw his silver wolf dagger at its back. His aim was true, and it stabbed deep into the boss' shoulder. Gaewak. The air around the boss' nose and mouth shook violently. In the meantime, Haruki moved to where the boss could not see him. And then he turned conceal off. The boss detected Haruki and swirled around. Karen did not miss her chance. Atuan. Once again, her magic struck the boss in the head. The boss' eyes grew more and more bloodshot. Just as it turned back to Karen, Haruki slashed at its back. Hey, don't forget about me. He immediately turned conceal back on, and then he easily dodged the spear thrust as the boss turned around. And now for some improvisation. The path they walked was always unpredictable. If you took one wrong step, he shuddered at the thought. However, he also laughed. Yes, this was good. Certain victory awaited him now. While the road was narrow and dangerous, the end was now clear. Haruki regained the enemy's attention. Ria stopped the attacks that nearly hit him. Karen would occasionally slam it with her powerful magic. The target kept changing. Haruki would use conceal. The boss could no longer ignore Haruki. Just because his presence had vanished. The target scale moved back and forth between Karen and Haruki. The boss was now more open than ever before. Over here, Haruki appeared. The boss reacted. In that moment, Karen's magic came flying. Ataan. Magic crashed into the back that had a dagger pierced into it. It pushed the dagger deeper into its shoulder, severing it. The boss' arm fell to the floor. Graag. It lurched forward, screaming as it held its shoulder. Its eyes were full of hatred as it glared at Karen. And then it clenched its spear tightly with its remaining hand. The boss threw it towards Karen. Or it tried to. I told you. Don't forget that I'm here. Haruki thrust his magic sword into the boss' brain. He pressed, and it sunk deeper and deeper with a wet sound. 1 second. The boss' body twitched as it crumbled to the ground. Haruki pulled out the blade and moved back. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. The boss stopped twitching completely. Just then, the dungeon began to flicker. At the same time, he felt his body grow hot. This time, the level up sickness was pretty bad. But, Kakaraboshi. Even as her legs shook, Karen raised her hand and approached him. Haruki thrust out his right hand and shouted back, yes. On this day, Haruki and Karen had worked together. and become mid-rank adventurers. Chapter 49.1 Let's accept a support request. What they got after defeating the boss was a large, old spear, and also 5 smaller ones. The large spear rejected both Haruki and Karen, which meant it was too heavy for them to carry. Even though it was in terrible condition, it was apparently still a weapon. Haruki managed to drag it and push it into the magic bag. Next were the small spears. Each was about 20 centimeters long. They were closer to throwing knives if anything. Haruki reached for one hesitantly, but the small spears did not reject him. So, this boss likes to make miniatures too? I doubt it. They had fought so hard to defeat it. He wanted to think that meant it was a rare item. Haruki looked at it carefully. But no matter what he thought, it just looked like a miniature spear. The head was sharp, and it looked like it would pierce you if you just touched it. As for the other side, there was a hole in it like a straw. Really? What the hell is this? Do you mind if I look at it? Haruki handed one of them to her. Karen dropped the miniature spear. He had seen this happen before. You couldn't carry it? Yes. In that case, Haruki touched his chin. There were 2 possibilities that he could think of. The mini spear was a dagger or some kind of throwing weapon. Still, it was too small for a dagger. Haruki couldn't imagine using them to fight a monster. So, they were almost certainly used for throwing. As for why it looked like a straw, was it to draw out blood from an enemy after piercing them? It seemed pretty deadly. Do you mind if I used this? Of course not. Shaking. Behind him, Ria was shaking her leaves as if she wanted it. Did you want to use this as a weapon? It'll probably poke out of you before you can shoot it. Wiggle wiggle. Huh? You want it to commemorate our victory? Oh, okay then. He handed one of them to Ria. After they had finished inspecting the items, Haruki and Karen headed to the central layer, that is, the stairs that led to the 10th floor. When they had finished climbing down the stairs, they saw that a vast field of grass spread out before them. The sky was blue and there were clouds floating up above. They could even see trees growing in the distance. They seemed quite big too. It was messing with his depth perception. Whoa, wow. They stood on the 10th layer and exhaled. It's amazing. It really is. Information about the central layer could be read on the wiki, but there was not much there. And so Haruki and Karen knew that the interior would change drastically once they reached it. However, the reality of the dungeon far exceeded what Haruki had been imagining. There really is a sky inside of the dungeon. Haruki had thought it would be a ceiling painting. Surely it would just be a very realistic depiction of the sky. That's what he had been thinking. However, no matter how he looked at it, it was real. Haruki had worked at a printing company, and yet his eyes could not tell the difference between this and the sky you could see from the surface. The 10th layer was just a single floor. There was a grassy field that stretched out very far, but they could also see the dungeon walls near the horizon. It was like a garden surrounded by dungeon walls, or maybe it should be called a paradise. How is this connected to the floor below? Were the stairs near the dungeon walls? Or maybe they were hidden somewhere in the grass. Haruki touched his chin and thought about it. However, he could not think of the answer. It had not been written in the wiki either. After all, they were the first humans to reach this place. There was a big gap in combat ability between beginner and mid-range adventurers. It was said that this was because something changed when you reached the center layers. But what was it? More skills or some kind of awakening? Haruki had speculated about it, and so he had to check. He tried to suppress his excitement as he took out the skill board. Karaboshi Haruki 27 Gender, Male. Skill point, 3-5. Class, Hidden Sword Master. Divine Protection. Cloth 1 less than greater than new. Vitality. Stamina 3. Natural Recovery 2. Strength. Strength 3. Agility. Quickness 3. Dexterity 3. Technique. Weapon Mastery. One-handed sword 3. Throwing 2. Light armor 3. Kick 1. Conceal 2. Imitate 2. Intuition. Detection 2. Special. Growth Acceleration Max. Tame 1. Divine Protection. 1 new. Divine Protection. Haruki was so excited. It was the same special skill that Masatsugu had. He had acquired it. Haruki allowed himself to calm down before opening up the explanation for the skill. Divine Protection. 1 receive protection from various gods. Max 3. Haruki exhaled the hot air that had built up inside him. Divine Protection. This was big. That being said, maybe it wasn't all that effective as the description suggested. Receive protection from various gods. It didn't say what types or how much protection. It was possible that it was little more than those lucky charms that students get when preparing for an exam. Maybe it would be better for him to keep his expectations in check. That was the only difference in the skill board for now. So there was a good possibility that the difference between being a beginner and a mid-rank adventurer was whether or not you had divine protection. Though, it seemed like a good idea to not depend on its effect too much. Even after reading the explanation, he didn't know what abilities were affected by the skill. Because of this, Haruki was not brave enough to put points into divine protection. It would be fine if the skill simply made him stronger. However, it would be dangerous if it strengthened the disappearance of his presence. If that happened, Haruki himself might just disappear altogether. He should wait until he had a better understanding of the skill before he started putting points into it. Furthermore, unlike other skills, this one didn't start at 0. It was at 1 as soon as it appeared. The source of this content November L/N. Was it because it was impossible to have 0 divine protection? Or maybe it was 0 until it appeared. In any case, he was happy that it would take 1 point less to max it out. What happened? Karen looked at the skill board from the side. A new skill appeared after we came out into the central layer. Apparently, it gives you divine protection. That's amazing. And, you add cloth? Yes, that had bothered him too. It had, but he didn't want to admit it. Was there a god of cloth? Even if there was, it must be very minor. Don't say that. Don't pry into it. It would just make him sad. Garen's words were forcing him back to reality. The heat was leaving his body rapidly. Karaboshi, what about me? You. He swiped the display. Kurosaki Karen 18 gender, female. Skill points, 2-4. Class, spirit user, hammer user. Divine protection, human 1. New, vitality, stamina 1, natural recovery 1, strength 1, magic power 3, magic compatibility 2, magic manipulation 3, agility, quickness 0, dexterity 1, technique, weapon mastery, blunt weapon 1, light armor 1, intuition, detection 1, special, luck 1. Divine protection 1 new, human 1. Did that mean someone who was close to a human? Or maybe it was a human god? There was no way to tell for sure. Was it possible that it changed when you leveled up? He hoped so. That was Haruki's hope, as someone who had received the protection of the cloth. You really can't tell much based on this alone. Yes, our number. Never mind, she suddenly started to mutter, but unfortunately, Haruki knew what she was going to say. That sounds a lot better than a cloth god. Yes, my god is called cloth. Damn it. Why did I have to get something that was this special? Haruki couldn't help but be sulky. Chapter 49.2 What about Ria? Karen asked. Haruki shook his head. Surely not. However, he still had to check. His finger shook as he swiped again. And then, Ria 1 gender, female. Skill point, 4, class, dual-wielding leaf demon. Divine protection, earth 1 less than greater than new, vitality, stamina 0, natural recovery 0, strength 2, agility, quickness 1, dexterity 2, technique, weapon mastery, throwing 3, intuition, detection 1, special, treasure chest 2. Divine protection 1 new. It's there. It really is. Shocking. So even a monster could receive divine protection. Maybe Ria was just special, or the monsters on the center layer also had divine protection. If it was the latter, then things would get very dangerous for them. Stith. Huh? Follow current novels on Novelb, in com. Ria started to pat Haruki on the shoulder. Don't feel too bad. That's what it sounded like she was saying. Were those the words of someone who stood much higher than him, with their acquired earth? The sun was blinding today as well. Though, they were underground. The road to becoming a noticeable being. We finally reached the center layer! Hello, it's Aero. Today, we finally beat the 9th floor boss and reached the center layer. I'm not sure if the road here was long, or if it was over all too soon. Regardless, I am filled with emotion just thinking about it. Greater than underscore? The center layer, it's amazing. Underscore caret, just like it said on the wiki, it's like being on the surface, even though you are underground. How far does this sky go? What if it connects to a different dungeon? While we are officially mid-rank adventurers now, we only just arrived here, so I have to get much stronger so that I can reach the deepest part. Greater than underscore? I worked hard leveling up today as well. Now, have I taken one step closer to a future of having a real presence? Maybe. The day after he made the blog post, Haruki received a single message. When Haruki saw the words, "You have a new message," appear on his management screen, he raised his fist in the air in triumph. Maybe this meant his presence had become stronger, now that he was a mid-ranking adventurer. Was this because of his divine protection? He didn't know what Cloth One was, but still. He loudly took in a deep breath. What could it be? His heart was racing. Haruki made up his mind and opened the message. The sender was Keijimitsu. It was so unexpected that he raised his voice in surprise. This wasn't something as small as the name being familiar to him. This was the ranker that continued to break the records for the highest floor reached in Chikaho while Masatsugu was on an expedition. When it came to Hokkaido, the most famous things were bears, crabs, and Keijimitsu, and that was not an exaggeration. That's how famous he was to adventurers. Besides, he really stuck out. He was the opposite of Haruki and had a really strong presence. And it was this Keijimitsu that had sent him a message. Did I do something wrong? Haruki's hands shook and sweat appeared on his forehead. Support request. I would like to talk to you through chat. That was the entire message from Keijimitsu. Aside from that, there was a URL to the chat room and a password. What does he mean by support request? While Haruki had hopes and dreams, he wasn't so conceited as to forget reality. Yes, he had reached the center layer, but that didn't mean he was good enough to be called in to support a ranker. Mid-rank adventurers were about 10% of all adventurers, but there were hundreds of thousands of adventurers. He didn't know the exact numbers, but there were at least 100 mid-rankers in Hokkaido. Besides, the majority of adventurers were just doing it as a hobby. It was for food or money. They weren't aiming to complete the dungeons. So while mid-rank adventurers were only 10%, there were even less when you restricted it to adventurers whose goal was to conquer. In other words, being mid-rank didn't automatically mean that you were good. Why would he choose me among all those other adventurers? Haruki tilted his head. However, he could not think of a good reason. First, he replied to the message and then entered the chat room. Keijimitsu's room locked. System message. Air has entered the chat room. System message. Keijimitsu has entered the chat room. Air. Hello. Keijimitsu. Sorry to call you out like this. Air. Not at all. Did something happen? Keijimitsu. Do you know that a monster parade started in the Chikaho center layer? Air. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. Air. Which floor? Keijimitsu. The 10th. Keijimitsu. And I want to introduce you to the hunting party. Air. Why me? Keijimitsu. I heard a rumor that you annihilated a monster parade. Keijimitsu. Also, a mid-rank adventurer. Air. I only just became one recently. Air. How do you know I'm not too weak? Keijimitsu. We won't know until you try. Keijimitsu. However, if this continues, there will be too many monsters, and it will start a stampede. Air. I heard that monster parades disappear after enough time has passed. Keijimitsu. Usually, yes. Keijimitsu. But I think things are different this time. Keijimitsu. There are rare types inside of the monster parade. Air. That's why you think it will turn into a stampede? Keijimitsu. It's possible. Haruki looked at his monitor and groaned. Air. You've explored up to the 24th floor, right? Keijimitsu. Yeah. Air. Then can't you do something about a 10th floor monster parade? Even if it's just brute force. There was one reason that monster parades were avoided. They were a bad fit. In monster parades, monsters kept pushing forward one after another. They would jump over the bodies of the dead and close in on you. And if that happened, then popular weapons such as great swords and spears could not be used to the best of their ability. It was the same with the popular bow. If you encountered a monster parade, you would run out of arrows quickly. Even if you were an adventurer who could kill countless monsters, it was always difficult to fight under the distinct circumstances that were a monster parade. If the difference in strength between you and the monsters was 4 or 5 floors, then you would likely be killed, just like Shikama. However, if there were at least 10 floors between you, you should be able to get through, even if it was by brute force. That is what Haruki thought. However, Keijimitsu, we tried doing that, but it was no good. Keijimitsu rejected the notion. Air. Why was that? Keijimitsu. It's because of the rare types. Keijimitsu. And by rare types, I mean demi-humans. There are advanced lizardmen. Keijimitsu. They are normal monsters on the 30th layer. Air. Whoa. Just like in the chat, Haruki muttered aloud as he stared at his monitor. It was said that normal monsters were about the same strength as the boss that is 5 floors below. So a normal monster on the 10th floor was just as strong as a boss on the 5th floor. If you could defeat the 5th floor boss, then you could defeat normal monsters on the 10th floor. And so the lizardmen of the 30th floor were just as powerful as the 25th floor boss. They would then be quite difficult for Keijiamitsu, who worked on the 24th floor. Furthermore, as they had to deal with 10th floor monsters at the same time during the monster parade, it was nearly impossible to fight properly. It seems even less likely that I will be able to do anything. Keijiamitsu, I wouldn't ask you to deal with the rare types. Keijiamitsu, I want you to deal with the monster parade while we lure away the rare types. Would that be possible then? Haruki thought about it. He still hadn't fought the 10th floor monsters yet, but he tried to calmly assess his own abilities. It would probably be quite hard. That was his conclusion as he began typing with the keyboard. I'm sorry, but I don't think I'm strong enough. Keijiamitsu, I see. That's too bad. Keijiamitsu, you'd get a lot of attention by just being a part of it. In that instant, Haruki stood up loudly from his chair and started hitting the keyboard so hard that it nearly broke. I will do it. Let me do it. And like that, it was decided that Haruki would participate in the hunting party that would take down the 10th floor monster parade. Chapter 50.1 3/3 sponsored by D.C. Visit novelbin.com for the best novel reading experience. Let's be an adventurer. Defeating dungeons with a skill board 50 Part 1. Let's meet the others at the team house. The subjugation period was to be 1 week. During that time, Haruki would have to stay in Sapporo. Karen had not been invited by Keijiamitsu. She could only attack with magic, and that put her at a disadvantage during monster parades, where you were attacked by many monsters at once. Even if Keijiamitsu had invited her, Haruki would have likely refused for her, and so they would not be able to hunt together for a while. Haruki had expected Karen to show her dissatisfaction over this, but she ended up being supportive of him going to Sapporo. It's a great honor to be invited by Mr. Keijiamitsu. You'll have to work harder since I won't be there to help you. It was with such words that she sent him off. After Haruki had secured a hotel room, he walked to the address that Keijiamitsu had given him. The place he arrived at was a single house that was not too far from Chikaho. It was a 3-story concrete building, and it was spacious enough for 10 people to live in comfortably. When he pressed the doorbell, the door was opened immediately. Yes, sir. The person who had appeared was a woman in her mid-20s. But the moment she saw Haruki, she tensed up. Still, the fact that she immediately returned to herself showed that she was very capable. I'm sorry to have surprised you. I am Aya. Repair? Oh, Aya was shocked for a second. Shocked about what? Haruki felt like he was being misunderstood. However, it seemed that she had now figured out that he was the blogger. Her guard started to lower. It was about 20% left. As for it not going to zero, there was nothing he could do about that. After all, they were meeting for the first time. It was no wonder that she was suspicious. Haruki persuaded himself of this fact as he followed her into the house. He was then led to a living room where he saw a man sitting on a couch. Haruki squinted at him. There you are. Hello, Imaya. The man's body exuded an aura that ensured that no one would be able to ignore him. And in spite of the fact that he was wearing normal clothes, he looked like he was shining. It was as if there was a spotlight on him. Keijiamitsu. Nice to meet you. This man was Keijiamitsu. He was a ranker, and one of the most popular adventurers based in Hokkaido, and with such a person right in front of him, Haruki couldn't help but shudder. Damn it. He was so bright. He had such a strong presence that Haruki might as well disappear. Haruki's body was rejecting this man as if he was a ghost that was facing an exorcist. His meager presence shook with fear over the prospect of being erased. Keijiamitsu was the most famous adventurer in Hokkaido and also the one with the strongest presence. He attracted attention when he walked into town, and all the monsters targeted him in the dungeons. His body was also almost twice as big as Haruki, and while his clothes were casual, you could still see that his muscles were bulging underneath. But more than anything, there was a similar, overpowering feeling that Masatsugu also had. If Haruki fought against Masatsugu, he would surely lose before he was able to even resist. He could tell the difference in power by just looking at him. Keijiamitsu gestured for him to sit, and so Haruki hesitantly sat in front of him. Damn it! What should he do? His own presence was going to disappear. With such a strong presence in front of him, the masked Haruki could not be calm. Perhaps this was just the natural reaction to feeling his power. Regardless, Haruki could not help moving around in his seat. What do you think of my team house? Big, ain't it? Yes. I've never been to a team house before. Well, not many teams have their own base. As the name implied, a team house was a base used by a team. It was a place where all of your fellow adventurers could sleep and store items they acquired in the dungeons. Especially large teams tended to have houses like this. Masatsugu, Bacon, and Shigure were other adventurers who had houses. On the other hand, you could say that you needed to be at their level in order to have a house. It cost money to keep one, and so beginners and mid-rank adventurers could not have one. However, it was quite cozy, like a secret lair. The little boy in Haruki felt quite excited. Ah, that's right. We're all going to be fighting and risking our lives together. So you don't have to be so polite when you talk. But, besides, aren't you older than me? It's nothing to be worried about. Indeed, according to the age displayed on his blog, Haruki was older than Keijimitsu. That as if it was really true. However, this was still a rancor. As Haruki had experience working in a company, it took a lot of courage to talk casually to a superior. If anything, Haruki wondered if this wasn't a test of his character. Should he really comply? As he thought hard about this, Keijimitsu stood up. His knees were shaking just a little. Was he tired from his daily leveling? First, I'll introduce the other members to you. The woman who had opened the door for him must have called the others. With her in the lead, the four adventurers entered the living room and they took one look at Haruki and flinched. Why? You already know my name. My main weapon is a great sword, and I'm part of the advance guard. Next, Keijimitsu pointed to a short man. That's Yoshi. He's our archer. I'm Yoshi. Nice to meet you. Yoshi was a man, but he was thin and had a feminine figure. He also seemed a little weak and clumsy. And this is Becky. She's also an archer. I am Becky. Nice to meet you. Becky was the woman who had greeted him at the door. She seemed shaky still. And next to her is Van. He's a great sword wielder like me. Van was like Keijimitsu. He was very muscular. The biceps under his clothes looked strong, but there was something in his eyes that looked like agitation. And lastly, we have Doroneko, a spear wielder. Chapter 50.2 Let's be an adventurer. Defeating dungeons with a skill board 50 Part 2. Imtudu Doroneko. Doroneko said with a frantic straightening of his back. Was it stage fright? He was shaking. So, this is Team Ariel. Imaya. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintances. He got up to greet them. At the same time, the members of Team Ariel all recoiled in horror. As I said, you can take it easy with the formal talk. Oh, apparently, he was going to be very adamant about that. Haruki could read Keijimitsu's mood through his voice, and so he made his decision. Right. So, it looks like a lot of you guys get nervous easily. Shut up. But they look so tense. That's your fault. Keijimitsu scowled and then sighed. Me? I heard the rumors. But that mask really is terrifying when seeing it for the first time. I see. Haruki started tracing his finger over the mask without thinking. It's because your body had so little presence. It looks like the mask is floating. Still, the way you cut it off like that, it's not normal. Do you have some kind of awakening skill? Haruki's vision was starting to blur. He wasn't crying. It was just a yawn. This chapter is updated by NovemberElbin.com. He snuffled and then opened his mouth. Just like this, huh? I just have a very thin presence. As soon as those words left his mouth, he felt his mental fortitude get carved away. He ground his teeth and tried to stay conscious. I did see you write in your blog that your presence was like air. But that's not just a character you play? Yeah, if only it was just a character. Damn it. Keijimitsu's question pierced through Haruki's heart. He was about to reach his limits mentally. The truth wizard. I see. Well, I understand just how you feel. Air, huh? You know, I actually wanted to use conceal but my presence is just too strong, and it could not be hidden. How enviable. Haruki wanted to shout at him in protest. However, his sorrow was real. He really was sad about how strong his presence was. In fact, there were tears in his eyes and he was trembling. Next to him, the other members of Ariel were muttering. Here he goes again. It was clear that they had heard this story many times and were quite exasperated. And so Keijimitsu, who shook with anger over the curse that was his stronger presence, had to be soothed by Haruki, who cried over the curse that was his weak presence. And once that was done, they talked about their plan in regards to the monster parade. Of course, there was not much to talk about. Haruki was in charge of the monster parade, and Yoshi the archer would go with him as support. And while Haruki was dealing with the monster parade, the members of Ariel would lure away the boss and defeat it. That was the plan. Mr. Keijimitsu, the monster parade team is just me and Yoshi. Hey, brother, you don't need to call me Mr. But we're brothers who have the same problem, aren't we? Yeah. Apparently, Keijimitsu now felt that he was just like him. Haruki could only sigh and mutter vaguely. However, an adventurer like him addressing a ranker by just their name felt rude. That being said, it was hard to refuse him. "I'll do what I can," he said. "As for more people to deal with the monster parade, there are none." "Why? Do you think there are more people who are stupid enough to want to do it?" Who was the stupid one here? That's what he wanted to say. However, it was true. No one was dumb enough to stand in the way of a monster parade. At best, you would find yourself involved in one and try to survive while killing monsters. It was a great feat. However, as he had no presence, the spotlight could not be on him. Well, that's not the only reason. All of the strong adventurers have headed to Shinjuku. The only people that are left are the ones who are leveling on the upper layers. Gathering a bunch of people who can only fight on the 10th floor will only result in more casualties. In that case, it would be better to go in a small group of the best people who look like they could survive a monster parade. Look, I'm not saying you have to succeed in one attack. If things get dangerous, you can run away. If you don't have enough power, you can use hit-and-run tactics and chip away at their strength. Indeed, his words did make a kind of sense. Going up against it with middling numbers and strength would mean they wouldn't be as unified. It would take too much effort to help the weaker ones, which could have disastrous results. Instead of doing everything at once, chipping away at the monster parade through ambushes was more likely to be successful. "We'll do our best to support you. After all, whether or not we can survive a battle with the Lizardman is up to you, heir." So, in other words, they were only going to help Haruki in order to ensure their own survival. They applied a lot of pressure, but not too much. It was just right. He felt that he was accepted. After that, they went over the finer details of how they would go about it. Monster Parade, Chikaho Discussion Thread 75. Avoid 54. Name, Keijimitsu. Hey, you, the person that talked about the adventurer who got through the monster parade. If you're here, answer me. 55. Name, Anonymous Monster Parade Avoider. What is it? 56. Name, Keijimitsu. Is it you? Why did you introduce that monster to us? When he came to our team house, I was so shocked that I thought my heart was going to explode. 57. Name, Anonymous Monster Parade Avoider. 56. Lamau. I guess just a coward then. 58. Name, Anonymous Monster Parade Avoider. A floating mask with tentacles and a plant, right? So he really was just like the rumors said? Lol. 59. Name, Keijimitsu. 57. You should see him close up. A floating mask is moving right towards you. Some of the members looked like they were going to cry. 58. There were no tentacles, but there were feathers. 60. Name, Anonymous Monster Parade Avoider. Feathers. Lol. Damn it. I'm laughing so hard I think I'm going to die. So, the masked guy really is a monster? 61. Name, Keijimitsu. I don't think he's a monster. Probably. 62. Name, Anonymous Monster Parade Avoider. You don't sound very confident. Lol. So, are you going hunting now? I'm interested to know how he fights with those daggers. I'll be expecting a detailed report. 62. Name, Keijimitsu. Right. Leave it to me. Chapter 51.1. Let's be an adventurer. Defeating dungeons with a skill board. 51. Part 1. Let's learn to fight with a ranker. The goal was to defeat the monster parade in 7 days, and so Haruki needed to get used to the 10th floor monsters first. The monsters that appeared on the 10th floor of Chikaho were anteaters, who were demi-humans, just like the owners. And they were called Boroboros. They were the same type as the boss for the 9th floor of the garage dungeon, but the normal ones were a little smaller. According to Keijimitsu, they were about as strong as the owners. The Boroboros were equipped with daggers, long swords, and spears. In terms of skill, They were equal to adventurers who worked on the 4th and 5th floor. But they were also very physically capable. If you only judged them by skill alone, you would be in for a terrible surprise. Haruki had once obliterated a monster parade that included owners, and so a monster parade with Boroboros should not be completely impossible. However, the Boroboro had weapons. He would have to watch the movements of the new monsters and learn quickly. If he couldn't do that, Haruki wouldn't be much help. In any case, the plan could not be put into action until Haruki was used to being on the 10th floor, and so, on the day he arrived at the aerial team house, Keigemitsu and the others took Haruki to the 8th floor of Chikaho. Aside from Keigemitsu, Yoshi and Van accompanied them. Becky was staying in the house as she had other work to do. As for Doroneko, he was wounded during the previous time they had faced and been defeated in a monster parade. And while he was healed, he was staying behind, just in case. You don't have to be nervous. With our strength, everything up until the 10th floor should be easy. That's true. It went without saying, but Haruki had no doubts when it came to their ability. In fact, he didn't even think that saying anything could raise a flag. That's how strong they were. They had the Akaibashi Seiki series and the Kawasaki KS. All of Ariel's equipment was high-end. The price tags for them would be enough to make your eyes pop out of their sockets, and they used them expertly and sent the monsters to their graves. The speed at which the great swords moved, the unleashed arrows, everything was a step further than what Haruki thought was possible. The trajectory of Keigemitsu's attacks was a blur, and yet, this was still only half of what he was capable of. Haruki could tell by the way his muscles moved. That's amazing. Yeah, so now you know. Keigemitsu muttered a little self-deprecatingly as Haruki praised him. All of those damned monsters are targeting me. Having a strong presence isn't a good thing, you know? I guess so. Haruki had only meant to compliment his skill. But it was true. The monsters were all targeting Keigemitsu. So, having a strong presence really was tough. By the way, how are you going to separate the rare types from the monster parade? You'll find out when we do it. Keigemitsu said vaguely. Did they have some kind of special plan? The source of this content November L/N. Did it involve magic tools, or maybe they had an awakening skill? While Haruki was curious, he couldn't force the information out of them. Besides, it would be considerably more enjoyable if he waited for the right time. Haruki and Keigemitsu walked in the lead. Van and Yoshi watched them and leaned their heads towards each other. It's pretty crazy. Yeah. Do you think it really only reached mid-rank recently? The it they were referring to was air. While he had only just reached the center layers, the owners appeared on the 8th floor of Chikaho. The owners were demi-humans and had incredible combat power. It was also hard to reach their movements, which meant that both beginners and mid-rank adventurers had to be very careful when fighting them. And that included Air. That was supposed to be the case. But Air was now walking calmly through the dungeon. And it wasn't because Keigemitsu was swinging a great sword right next to him. If he was confident due to Keigemitsu's presence, then his guard would have been lowered more. If he had his guard down, he would not be able to notice the monsters before Keigemitsu, and he wouldn't be the first one to act. His first move was to throw his dagger. What he was using were his Iyaki Silver Wolf daggers, and he threw them the moment the owner had appeared. Both of them landed deeply into the eyeballs of the owners. After that, the plant monster on its back annihilated the silver wolves. All Keigemitsu had to do was put an end to the wounded owner. Then Haruki pulled out his dagger from the corpse and they continued to walk. During this time, Air and Keigemitsu continued to talk as if nothing had happened. It's frightening. Yes, I've never seen anything much like it before. Seriously. They couldn't tell where his power was coming from. How strong would he be if he went all out? They had no idea. Chapter 51.2 Let's Be an Adventurer. Defeating Dungeons with a Skill Board 51 Part 2. Yoshi and Van had been given the role of assessing Air's ability and determining how useful he would be during the monster parade. Of course, Ariel had no intention of using Air as if he were disposable. If he died during a quest that Ariel had accepted, they would forever have the terrible reputation of a team that uses weak adventurers like they are disposable items, and Keigemitsu had no intention of allowing that to happen to a team he had worked so hard to raise, and so he wanted Yoshi and Van to carefully assess what Haruki was capable of. If it turned out that Air wasn't strong enough, he was willing to allow him to train until he was. However, judging from what they saw now, it seemed completely unnecessary. If anything, The way he fought seemed like it exceeded that of Yoshi and Van. Keijimitsu had been desperate to use conceal, and yet, someone who could do it perfectly was right in front of them. It is a good thing we're on friendly terms with him. Seriously, and so Yoshi and Van sighed in relief. As Yoshi and Van watched him from behind, Haruki continued to walk forward nervously. When the first monster had appeared, the monster had been killed immediately by Yoshi's bow and Keijimitsu's great sword. Furthermore, neither of them had any changes in the rhythm of their breathing when they attacked. If it were Haruki, he would have been panting. But such things could cause you to be open to attacks. It also resulted in lowered energy. I see, so this was how they became stronger. Haruki watched their movements and understood the secret of their strength. He understood and copied. It was in order to get as close as he could to a ranker. He imitated to get closer to rankers, which would help him acquire a presence. Haruki spread out his presence detection, and when it caught a monster, he would throw his dagger immediately. He concentrated on his breathing, but not too much. He continued to talk with Keijimitsu at the same rhythm. This was quite difficult. Your breathing became irregular when you were tense. Don't give up. He analyzed, theorized and executed, and then tested it again. Little by little, Haruki learned how to keep his breathing steady. You use your daggers by throwing them? I only throw the old ones. That way, it won't hurt if I lose them. I see. By the way, that mask doesn't have any holes for your eyes, so how do you see? The mask is a magic tool. It doesn't affect my vision when I have it on. It's a magic tool. Can you ask what it does? It increases my presence. Follow current novels on Novelb.in.com. I said it increases my presence when I put it on. That's so worthless. Don't insult my mask. It's an amazing item. Even while this pointless banter went on, Haruki continued to search the dungeon. Keijimitsu's movements when he cut into the monsters were very educational for Haruki. He wanted to look at him carefully, but he often couldn't follow it, and so he would have to go off the changes in the air that he felt through detection, and then imagine the movements. The 8th floor boss was cut dead by Keijimitsu in the blink of an eye. There was nothing for Haruki to do. They activated the gate and continued to the 9th floor. Only owners appeared on the 9th floor. Still, Haruki did not stop moving. He had defeated many owners already, and Keijimitsu had fought even stronger enemies, and so they reached the next boss room without even taking a break. Do you want to fight with us, or you could just watch? The boss here was an owner, but this one had weapons. It was probably about as strong as the one from the garage. If he had enough time, Haruki should be able to defeat it. However, if he did participate in the fight, he was likely to just get in their way, since they were so much more skilled than him. I'll watch and learn. Got it. Alright, Yoshi, Van. Let's get this over with. Yes, understood. Yoshi and Van went right into their battle stance when they heard Keijimitsu's voice. Behind them, Haruki heightened his concentration. What was about to unfold in front of him was a battle by the top team of Hokkaido. He couldn't miss a single second of it. No. Even the smallest hints had to be caught. And so Haruki's concentration rose to its limit. It made 1 second seem like an eternity. He could not be more excited. It was then that Keijimitsu jumped forward. He was so fast. It was a speed that even Haruki could not follow with his eyes. But Haruki still felt the rush of wind after he was gone. 1 second after the attack. In just 1 second, the long-limbed goblin's body was separated into pieces. Yes, he has seen it. Haruki did a mental fist pump. What Haruki saw was just clear enough to not be an after-image. Keijimitsu exuded a strong presence as he closed in on the boss. Van jumped in from the side and took the lead, but the boss was so taken in by Keijimitsu's presence that it immediately swung towards him. That's when Van blocked the attack, and then an arrow came flying before the boss could fix its posture. The arrows landed in both of its eyes. Chapter 51.3 Let's Be an Adventurer. Defeating Dungeons with a Skill Board 51 Part 3, and Keijimitsu's great sword cut into the now completely unprotected body of the boss. All of this happened in 1 second. It was a frightening level of power and teamwork as well. How was that? I don't have the words to describe it. Surely no matter how he phrased it, he would not be able to hide his own jealousy. But he was jealous. Haruki was incredibly jealous of their strength. At the same time, he felt a passionate excitement. After all, if he tried, he might get there someday. When he had seen Masatsugu, he felt that he would never reach that level. However, when he saw Ariel fighting, He felt that it might be possible. It was a feeling in his gut. Was that the difference between Masatsugu and Ariel, or perhaps it was that Haruki had become stronger, and he now saw the way to reach those heights. In any case, Haruki was excited after seeing Keijimitsu and the others fight. His blood felt hot as it coursed through his veins. This was a rare experience where he was able to get a close look at the way other people fought. There was no way that he wouldn't get excited. He wanted to move. He wanted to copy them right now. However, Haruki had to hold back the urge. If he moved freely now, he would be no different from a child. And so Haruki immediately carved the images and sensations into his brain. This was so that he could make use of them the next time that he fought. The 10th floor looked a lot like how it did in the garage dungeon. However, there were more trees in this field. Maybe 1,000 or 2,000 more. However, the sky looked exactly the same. Maybe the garage dungeon was just on the other side of the wall. That's what it felt like. And in the center of the field, he saw a black cluster. Is that the monster parade? Yeah, there are more than before. Keijimitsu's face twisted with anger. It wasn't just a small number like 100 or 200. He was supposed to defeat them? This was ridiculous. Haruki was suddenly feeling very cowardly. No one would want to fight hundreds of monsters like this. However, he had already said that he would do it. And so he had no choice but to face them. Yes, I will do my best. If he got through this, he might be able to acquire a stronger presence. Well, guess I better go and kill these small fries. Yeah, Haruki had yet to fight a Barobero that wasn't a boss, and so he needed time to learn how to fight them. Oh, don't go forward yet. It'll be bad if it notices you. Oh, Haruki had taken a step forward, but Keijimitsu stopped him with a hand on his chest. A cold sweat ran down Haruki's back. How strong was Keijimitsu's arm? While he was just holding him back with a single arm, he felt as if he was being blocked by a concrete building. However, that wasn't why Haruki was nervous. He was nervous because he sensed a single, tremendous presence from within the monster parade. If he moved any closer, he would enter the range of its presence detection. There was a thin layer in the air that was the border, and it was right in front Haruki's nose. The being that Haruki sensed was a rare type, and while it was still quite far away, there was something so threatening about it that it sent a chill down his spine. If Keijimitsu had not stopped him, Haruki would have crossed the boundary and been attacked by it. That was close. Haruki wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. How are you going to lure monsters from this far away? It seemed impossible to do it without attracting the attention of the rare type. Well, just you watch, Keijimitsu said as he jerked his chin up. Then Yoshi knocked an arrow. The source of this content November L by N. When it was unleashed, it cleanly avoided the boundary and landed in the ground. Oh, that's when Haruki noticed it. There was a monster that was close to the spot that the arrow fell, maybe about 200 meters away, and the monster had noticed them because of the arrow. So, is that arrow disposable? Of course not. When he looked, he saw that Yoshi's hands were rotating. Apparently, a line had been attached to the arrow. Arrows are disposable items, but you have to choose where to use them. I see. Now, from here it's Air's turn. At worst, we'll need you to be able to charge into a monster parade and still survive. That's a tall order. Of course, it is. We want you to be able to kill as many monsters as possible. It'll do us no good if you fall easily. That was true. Haruki had a conflicted smile as he unsheathed his daggers. Ria, I want you to draw its attention first. We'll also be counting on your support for the close attacks once the fighting starts. Yes, Ria wriggled. In front of Haruki, the Barobero was running with a sword in hand. However, it was clearly targeting Keijimitsu, who stood behind Haruki, and so Ria shot at it provocative, and then the Barobero switched its target to Haruki. Now, Haruki concentrated his focus. He calmed his breathing and sank deeply. This was his first time seeing this enemy, the first time fighting it, and this was incredibly exciting for him. Now, let the adventure begin. Chapter 52.1 First of the chapters that I owe. Sponsored by DC. Let's be an adventurer. Defeating dungeons with a skill board 52 Part 1. Let's level up in preparation for the monster parade. Keijimitsu watched Haruki fight while also being careful to stay out of the lizardman's detection range. He was using hit and run tactics, or so Keijimitsu thought at first, but surprisingly, he was dealing successive attacks with his feet in one place. Haruki dodged his opponent's attacks with a sway. Any attacks that he missed were blocked by the plant. Keijimitsu was simply impressed. There were not many people who fought with daggers, which meant that you were limited when it came to researching how best to use them. Because of this, most people ended up handling them similar to swords. Of course, there was no point in using daggers if that was what you were going to do. Just use a longsword or greatsword. However, his fighting style was very much his own. While he clearly knew the basics of handling a greatsword or longsword, he put more weight on the number of attacks instead of the force of individual attacks. If a single attack was powerful, the time you are fighting would be shortened, and that meant there was less of a chance of you dying. And so most people cared about dealing as much damage with a single attack. With daggers, you had to be close to the enemy, and so standing still and launching as many attacks as possible seemed like a good way to increase the risk of getting killed. That's what Keijimitsu thought. But he was wrong. Haruki saw all of the enemy's attacks. He saw them clearly, and he could predict what kind of counterattack would be coming next, and he dodged them with sways alone. Keijimitsu didn't know any other mid-ranking adventurers who were capable of this, and there was no point in comparing him to other dagger users. What do you think? He's not the just yet. Yeah, Keijimitsu asked them. Yoshi and Van had the same opinion. Of course, Keijimitsu agreed. There was no question that Air was strong enough to hunt on the 10th floor. If anything, he was at the level where he could reach the 12th floor without much problem. However, when it came to charging into a monster parade, he was too slow in killing enemies. You could not take more than 10 seconds in killing a single monster. If you took longer than that, they would swarm around you and kill you. 10 seconds was the maximum time you could take in a monster parade, but an average of 5 seconds was the ideal. However, 20 seconds had already passed since the fight began, and Air had yet to defeat a single monster. Keijimitsu, what should we do? If we sent him into a monster parade like this, he'll definitely die. Keijimitsu knew this without being told. However, he could not think of another adventurer who would be able to succeed either. At least, not in Sapporo. All of the adventurers who were there now were beginners. Outside of Ariel, the rest had all gone to Shinjuku. It would be possible to pull those remaining beginners up to the central layers. However, they did not have enough time. Currently, Ariel had no other options, and so that was why Keijimitsu had jumped on the rumor about Air annihilating a monster parade by himself. I suppose I was wrong. Keijimitsu didn't show it, but he was horribly disappointed. He makes a lot of bad moves. He hasn't been an adventurer for long, and so he doesn't have enough experience. So, what will you do? We should watch a little longer. Besides, the monster parade isn't so active that we have to panic. It would be a different story if it was an ordinary monster parade. However, there were rare types in this one. If it became more active, it was possible that it would turn into a stampede. The source of this content November L/N. If a stampede were to happen in Chikaho, without a doubt, Sapporo would become the next Shinjuku. Keijimitsu had stayed in Sapporo in case such a thing were to happen in the dungeon. You never knew what would happen in these places. The previous stampede had made this terribly clear to him. I wouldn't be much of a ranker if I couldn't even protect this place. Those who went out to save Japan won't have a place to return to if I don't. As a ranker who had stayed, he would protect Sapporo. Even though there was not much hope, he would cling to what they had and aim for the best possible future. When Air finally killed his first Barobaro, he fell to his knees. Is he sick from leveling up? No, surely it's too early for that. I think it might be a lack of stamina. They all muttered. Killing a 10th floor monster should not cause a level up sickness that was so bad it forced you to your knees. At least, no one in Ariel experienced a sickness this bad since they became mid-rank adventurers. Though, that was also because they shared their experience as a party and took extra safety margins. In Keijimitsu's experience, there were 3 necessary elements for an adventurer to conquer a dungeon. The first was their physical level, the second was their skill level, and the third was combat experience. Chapter 52.2 Let's Be an Adventurer. Defeating dungeons with a skill board. 52 Part 2 Monsters were not so easy as to be defeated by skill alone. Air lacked combat experience as he had been a beginner until recently. Keijimitsu didn't think he was weak enough to get this sick over leveling up, but he also didn't think he was strong enough to defeat monsters that were way above him. And so Keijimitsu assumed that the reason for this was that Air had run out of stamina after just one fight. That usually wouldn't happen so quickly, but it was more realistic than the level sickness. What will you do? take a break." Next, Air's voice interrupted him. There was a madness in his voice and Keijimitsu became speechless for a second. There was a strong light in Air's eyes that were void of fatigue or nausea. Once Keijimitsu saw this, he looked at him seriously. "All right, Yoshi," he signaled and hid Yoshi lure in the next monster. Was his stamina all right? But surely he would just die against these weak monsters? Still, Keijimitsu watched him cautiously so that he could help him if things got dangerous. But in spite of his worries, next, more. Too slow. Air kept ordering for more. Hey, how long does he mean to fight? Keijimitsu, shouldn't you stop him soon? Stop that? Don't be ridiculous. Even Keijimitsu felt uncomfortable about the idea of stopping him now. After all, he could see that Air's movements in battle were improving every time. It was as if he were a renowned adventurer who had merely forgotten how to fight up until now. Keijimitsu felt a chill go down his spine. On the other hand, his blood felt hot. A fight that took 1 minute was 40 seconds the next time, and then it went down to 30, 20, 15 seconds. It kept getting faster, and his attacks were smoother as well. Both speed and force had clearly gone up. Keijimitsu was shocked by the attacks that aimed for the enemy's openings. He even gasped when he saw Air move in a way that shook the enemy so they were left vulnerable. Air was growing incredibly fast, and it was too fast for Keijimitsu to keep up with. That was in spite of the fact that he himself was considered to be quite far from the norm. Is he leveling up? Don't be ridiculous. We'd be on the 30th floor by now if killing a few Barobros was enough to level up. Yes, maybe he isn't leveling up, but then, is it that masked? Maybe it has some kind of berserk ability while fighting? No, that's not it. Going into a berserker mode would mean a change in voice and attitude. However, he could not sense that in Air. It was probably just that he was now able to tell what the best possible move was. Keijimitsu came to this conclusion based on his own experience. I think he just has really good eyes. As he said this, Keijimitsu felt another chill go down his spine. Air had eyes that could perfectly find the weaknesses of the Barobaro in such a short time. And he wasn't a strong adventurer. He was practically a beginner who had only just stepped foot into the central layers 10 times. 20. After that many fights, Air was able to take down the Barobros by only using the best possible moves. And that wasn't all. Next, Air kept requesting more monsters. Number. You've hunted enough. The source of this content November L by N. More. Keijimitsu grimaced but then laughed. This guy was mad. Fine. Keep sending him monsters until he drops you, but just do it. How many monsters in a row could Air defeat? Keijimitsu really wanted to know the limits of mankind, of adventurers. Perhaps he would see him break through them. As the one who had to lure in the monsters, Yoshi did not look happy. He was likely afraid that Air would be killed by a monster that he sent to him. Don't worry. Keijimitsu nodded reassuringly. If it looks like Air is in trouble, I'll do everything I can to help him. Fine. Before he knew it, Haruki was lying down on the ground. His back hurt because of Ria's leaves. Slap, slap, slap. She hit him repeatedly. It wasn't so much an "Are you okay?" but more of "Hey, this hurts, you could at least show some concern." Haruki chuckled as he slowly got up. Finally. Do you want some water? Oh, sorry. I haven't fainted in a while. Really? Well, now I have a teammate who prevents me from fighting for too long. But before that, there were a few times that I fainted. Don't you know that you could have died? That's what she said. She was very angry. Haruki thought of Karen and smiled. Sorry to have caused you any trouble. No. You fell only after you killed all of them. We just had to wait here until you woke up. Still, thanks to that, Haruki was still alive. Haruki drank the water that was offered to him. He also gave plenty to Ria. Chapter 52.3 Let's be an adventurer. Defeating dungeons with a skill board 52 Part 3. So, what do you think? Now that you've fought the Barobaro. I struggled at first with the range of my weapons. The monsters also thought differently. However, his experience with fighting the owners had given him a good grasp on how to manage. He just used it with the Barobaros. Furthermore, Haruki copied the movements he had seen Keijimitsu and the others using. This was quite difficult. It was no wonder. Even if you had support skills, surely it was not possible to copy the movements of adventurers who worked in the lower layers. But Haruki kept trying. Perhaps it was because he had leveled up, or it was the appearance of divine protection. As he continued to fight, Haruki slowly started to notice the changes in his physical ability. It was as if even when he used all of his power, he could still somehow go further. There was suddenly a new roof that was higher than before, and Haruki was getting closer to it with every fight. He stubbornly continued to mimic their movements and make adjustments as he headed towards his own limit roof. Ultimately, by the time he had hunted down 50 Boroboros, he was every bit as fast as them. And then, when his concentration had reached its climax, Haruki saw it. A faint white light in his vision. What was it? As soon as he noticed it, it disappeared. And no matter how hard he wished he could see it again, the light did not appear. But when he concentrated on fighting again, the light returned. But he couldn't react quickly when he was concentrating. And if he tried, it would vanish again. What the hell was it? He was so curious about this light. That was why he kept asking for more monsters. But in the end, he never did figure out what that light was. He felt that he would have been able to figure it out if he fought just a little more. Haruki returned the water bottle to Keijimitsu and checked his body for injuries. He had tested different moves and fought with everything he had, but it seemed that he was unharmed. However, he did feel heavy, but it could not be helped, considering how long he had fought. Should we head back then? What time is it? It's 2 p.m. Then I'll hunt a little more. What? Do you have other plans? We don't. Then I'll hunt. Keijimitsu looked at Yoshi and Van with a troubled expression. He said they had no plans. But was he lying? Sorry for inconveniencing you. I can just stay by myself. No. It's fine. It's no problem. If you want to stay, well, stay with you. Keijimitsu frantically interrupted him. Haruki didn't want them to stay if they didn't want to. But since he made the offer, he thought he would accept it. He threw some nutrition supplement rations into his mouth and stood up while holding his daggers. Alright. His goal today would be to kill 200 Boroboros. Monster Parade. A thread to discuss Chikaho 75, of aid. 211 name, Keijimitsu. That guy who introduced the adventurer to us. Come out. 212 name, anonymous who evades monster parades. What is it this time? 213 name, Keijimitsu. You pushed some crazy personnel onto us. He continued to hunt from 11 to 8. 214 name, anonymous who evades monster parades. That doesn't sound like you, Keijimitsu. So, it's just 9 hours? That's not impressive. 215 name, Keijimitsu. Fighting monsters for 9 hours is not impressive. He kept going at it like he was some kind of eating champion. 216 name, anonymous who evades monster parades. Eating champion. He was taking small breaks, right? 217 name, Keijimitsu. He only rested once when he collapsed. 218 name, anonymous who evades monster parades. Huh? Sorry, I don't get it. How many Boroboros did he kill in all? 219 name, Keijimitsu. 218. More than 200. They couldn't respawn fast enough. If they did, he would have probably reached 300 or more. 220 name, anonymous who evades monster parades. Can't respawn fast enough? Lol. What monster parade was this? Lol. I'm sure you helped too, right? Let's be real. 221 name, Keijimitsu. It wasn't a monster parade. I was just watching. I didn't help at all. 222 name, anonymous who evades monster parades. I was glad that I could kill 50 in one day. But I guess I'm just a bottom of the barrel slug in the grand scheme of things. 223 name, anonymous who evades monster parades. 50 is the limit for me as well. Keijimitsu. Is this guy really human? 224 name, anonymous who evades monster parades. No way. Lol. Updated from novel by end.com. 225 name, Keijimitsu. I wish it was a lie. I think he's human. He was eating a ration. The most we ever killed was 150. That's with all 5 of us. Seriously, what the? We're all creeped out by him, especially me. 226 name, anonymous who evades monster parades. He creeped out the strongest adventurer in Sapporo. It's no wonder Masatsugu was interested in him. Chapter 53.1. Heading towards the monster parade in Chikaho. The next day, Haruki went to the 10th floor to hunt Boroboros under Keijimitsu and the others' watch. Though it was just a matter of tuning himself. Would he forget about the way of fighting he had displayed yesterday? Would that light appear again? After confirming that, Haruki quickly withdrew. The first monster parade would be carried out on the following day. After splitting up with the members of Ariel, Haruki went back to the dungeon. He returned to the 10th floor and secretly activated the skill Nimble. He looked around, and when he had made sure that there were no other adventurers around, he took out his skill board. I'd like to have some kind of insurance just in case, though I think I may be found out as my basic skills continued to improve. In order to fight in the monster parade, Haruki wanted to increase his basic skills more than anything. However, his fighting style had already been observed by members of Ariel. If he continued to increase his physical skills, Keijimitsu would surely notice. Saying some poor excuse like "I just wasn't being serious yesterday" was not going to cut it for this kind of improvement in skill. The eyes of Ariel, who are at the foremost line in Chikaho, could not be so easily deceived. In order to prevent them finding out about the skill board, all he needed to do was merely to allocate basic skills when in front of Ariel. But he needed to know the monster's details for that. He couldn't just use his skills randomly, like raising the agility of an opponent with strong physical defense, or raising the attack of a physically frail opponent. If he didn't know their opponents, he could end up using his skills inefficiently. His points are limited. He couldn't afford to waste a single point due to a lack of judgment. Haruki opened up Ria's tree. Ria hadn't attacked a single monster with all her strength so far. The most she had done was repelling a dangerous attack close to Haruki. So even if he seemed to have drastically powered up all of a sudden, he could say, today Ria seems to be taking things seriously. In order for that excuse to be valid in the future, Haruki did not let Ria participate in his attacks. Ria, 1 gender, female. Skill points, class, dual-wielding leaf demon. Divine protection, Earth 1 less than greater than. Updated from novel by End.com. Vitality, stamina, natural recovery 0, strength, agility, instantaneous power, dexterity, technology, armor mastery, throw, double throw, intuition, detection, special, treasure chest. Divine protection. Boroboros are somewhat strong, so increase strength by 1. Then he put another point into a derived skill, in order to increase the number of available moves. Next, what about divine protection? Haruki realized just how helpful divine protection had been during the battle the day before yesterday. It exceeded the limits, or rather, raised the overall level of her basic abilities. It might be a little different than that, actually, but judging how it felt for him, that would be a perfect way to describe it. In that case, he had to allocate points there. He just had to. Ria, can I spend these last 2 points on divine protection? Haruki asked Ria, just in case. He didn't completely understand the effects of divine protection. Haruki's expectation was simple. If you increase your divine protection, it will increase your overall physical abilities. Perhaps even a completely different ability might be uncovered by doing that. That's why he asked. He wasn't sure about spending points on something he didn't fully understand instead of just raising a basic ability, like vitality or agility. Ria started swinging her leaves, and after some consideration, shook them up and down as if nodding. Thanks. Well then, here's the first point. Skill points. Divine protection, Earth 1 less than greater than. Earth treasured 1 less than greater than. Divine protection. Ooh, the name had changed. All right. With this, he could finally say goodbye to cloth. Wait, could cloth be used for the next letter? After a moment of excitement, Haruki's heart plunges to the ground once again. Still feeling a bit down, Haruki spends the last point. Skill points. Divine protection, Earth treasured 1 less than greater than. Guardian deity of underground treasures. Divine protection max. I see. He really hadn't understood the greatness of divine protection because it seemed too unimportant at first. Ptah is an Egyptian god of creation, a craftsman god who was worshipped in the ancient city of Memphis. He was also revered as a deity that protected underground resources. Since he was always painted green in his depictions, he was believed to be a plant god. Then after time went by, Ptah combined himself with the underworld god Osiris, which is why Osiris is also green. A treasure trove is underground resources. Chapter 53.2 Let's be an adventurer. Defeating dungeons with a skill board. 53 Part 2 A plant god for a plant being. A craftsman god for someone who likes to collect drops from bosses like trinkets. It's not hard to see the connection. Could it be that the god that is assigned to one's divine protection is related to one's traits? No way. If that were the case, It would be really something else. If Haruki's cloth were to turn into a divine protection god that could hide his presence, no one could ever know whether he was even there or not. No. Number. Haruki shook his head repeatedly. There can't be a god that cruel. So, Ria, how do you feel about your skills improving? Shakes. She moved her body, tried shooting a potato stone, and, wait, what kind of shot was that? After a loud bang that would make anyone shiver, the potato stone disappeared far into the distance. Shakes. You could say that Ria's abilities took a bit of a leap. Apparently, her abilities had grown even more than what she had anticipated. Without a doubt, the divine protection actually did affect one's basic abilities. We fought the boss of the 9th floor so that she would grow used to her new abilities. Ria's shooting speed had increased somewhat, but the real difference was in their sheer power. The boss, one of the biggest fish in the upper floors, fainted in agony with a single shot, and that was just after her first shot. Due to Ria's double throw, her second shot left the boss on the verge of death. What's more, Ria didn't even seem to have been going all out during that fight. How frightening. Updated from novel by N.com. However, this could be a huge boost to our survival rate during the monster parade. All I had to do was pray that we didn't mess it up somehow. It was the morning of the day where the monster parade operation would be taking place. After getting ready, Haruki left the hotel and headed towards Chikaho, and found Keijimitsu and the others passing through the gate, carrying a large box-like thing with them. Good morning, Keijimitsu. Yo, what's that thing you have there? The thing Keijimitsu and the other members of Ariel were carrying was a big wooden box, about 1 meter tall. They seemed to have no problem carrying it. But since they are so strong, Haruki could not be so sure the box was as light as it seemed to be. Well, you'll see once we get there. Haruki guessed that what was inside the box was whatever they used during their strategy to split the boss and monster parades apart. He had heard about the same day he arrived on Sapporo, but he had no idea what that thing actually was. He was curious about the box's contents, but he would see them for himself once they reached the 10th floor. Until then, Haruki entertained himself trying to guess what really was inside that box. The present members were Keijimitsu, Yoshi, and Van. Becky and Daraniko, who weren't there during Haruki's practice session, were also there. Have you recovered from your injury, Daraniko? Yeah, I'm much better. Huh? You look surprised. Oh, it's nothing. Haruki shook his head in confusion. Daraniko was actually a woman, since they hadn't really spoken so much up until then, plus the fact that she had short hair and a slender figure. Haruki had assumed that Daraniko was a man. Nevertheless, that didn't mean he had been 100% sure he was a man. Haruki opened his mouth and began to chew on words. Keijimitsu grinned, having realized about Haruki's misunderstanding. Yoshi and Van smiled as well. It would seem that Daraniko was often mistaken for a man, judging from their reaction. Keijimitsu's face went serious as he put his fingers in front of his lips, as if asking Haruki to shut up. Right. Saying something about it would really be a bad idea. The 6 of them, counting Haruki, arrived on the 10th floor after getting on a gate. Soon after, Keijimitsu put the wooden box on the ground and opened its lid. Oh, are those slimy eels? The box was filled to the brim with slimy eels. It was a bit nostalgic. Haruki suddenly remembered about that time he went out searching for Oiso. Back then, all that mattered was to defeat the boss. He had never thought the boss would be defeated so easily. Everyone grows stronger at their own speed. Keijimitsu and the others took out all of the eels from the box and spread them on the gate's floor. The gate could be used to escape in a worst-case scenario. But if the gate were to be blocked off at that time, it would be game over for them. So they blocked off the gate with those eels. It was a means to prevent the monster parade from using the gate. Chapter 53.3 Let's Be an Adventurer. Defeating Dungeons with a Skill Board 53 Part 3. Then, they lined up the eels on the ground. It looked exactly like a funnel lying down. The eels would guide the monster parade towards the narrow part of the funnel. That way, even if Haruki were by himself, he wouldn't be surrounded by the monster parade. But was that going to go so smoothly? How are we going to lure monster parade here? It was nothing to be proud of. But Haruki was not good at attracting aggro. He could aggro them by attacking them. However, Any monsters that Haruki had yet to attack could fail to notice him and head elsewhere. Well, use this. Is that a Puko? That's right. Haruki reflexively clapped his hands as a reaction to having understood. A Puko was capable of producing a cute poo cry from the bottom of its belly. That cry could be used to attract the monster's attention. It was a bit questionable, but these could be bought at a fairly high price in second-hand shops in Sapporo. There was no doubt that it would be effective. With it, they would surely be able to aggro the monsters, regardless of Haruki's ability. This will definitely work for the lesser monsters, but what about the boss? I'll lure him in myself. Keijimitsu confidently struck his own chest. But exactly how was he planning to lure in the boss? Haruki waited for an explanation, but it didn't look like something like that would arrive. None of Keijimitsu's teammates seemed to doubt him whatsoever, so he must certainly be able to pull it off one way or another. However, being someone who's not part of their team, Haruki could not really tell. Haruki wasn't mad about not knowing or anything like that. After all, it was only natural that there would be things he would not know about. He was simply a little anxious. Novel by N. But everything should be fine as long as the strategy works. After they were done setting up the slimy eels, the members gathered around the gate. Then, they began checking on their equipment. Hey, Keijimitsu, what is it? How long do you think it will take for these slimy eels to be absorbed by the dungeon? Oh, that. Well, those slimy eels were actually monsters that appeared usually in the dungeon down in Kushiro. If left unattended, they would eventually be absorbed. Probably about 3 hours or so. Can you finish up the monster parade in under 3 hours? Haruki deeply thought about that. There will be 500 monsters in the monster parade, and they had to finish it up in 3 hours. That meant that they had to kill about 2 or 3 monsters per minute. If their offensive is too unorganized or they take too much time, the slimy eels will be lost before they are done with the monster parade. And then the monsters will end up being scattered around. Do you think you can draw the boss as far as possible from here? I think I could do it. Yeah. In that case, I'm counting on you. Ria is really serious today. I'd appreciate it if you took the boss somewhere far away, where Ria's attacks can't reach it. They had limited time to defeat 500 monsters. In order for that to work, it was necessary that both Haruki and Ria fought against the monster parade with all their might. If Keijimitsu and the others started fighting the boss nearby, Ria's potato stones could end up hindering their battle. Got it. Keijimitsu meekly nodded at Haruki's request. Is everything ready? Keijimitsu asked the worked-up crew in a low voice. Both Haruki and the members of Ariel nodded silently. We are a little short on people to face this monster parade, and to make matters worse, there will be a boss as well. The truth is, I'd like to have more people for this job. But it is as I said before. If we just carelessly add people to our numbers, it could do more damage than actually help us. So it's going to have to be the 6 of us. Be proud of yourselves. The elite rankers I've personally chosen for this job. Even if it ends up not going as planned, it will be fine. If you fail, it won't mean that you can't try again. You can try as many times as long as you manage to return alive. So don't die. If you die, you will never be able to fight anymore. Survive, and see this strategy through. From this area of Sapporo, we will protect the hometown of those brave adventurers who have returned to recapture Shinjuku. Yeah, Keijimitsu's speech really fired up their spirit. Still, it was only 6 of them. But these 6 people alone would definitely be able to see this through. Keijimitsu sounded so confident that he successfully managed to make everyone believe that. Filled with fighting spirit, Haruki reached his assigned position. He looked at Keijimitsu and waited! Chapter 53.4 Let's be an adventurer. Defeating dungeons with a skill board 53 Part 4. Keijimitsu nodded. In response, Haruki took the Puko in his hand and pressed its belly. Poo 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 poo. He pressed the Puko's belly over and over again. If he let go for a single second, Keijimitsu and the others would be at risk of being swarmed by the Boroboros. So he carried on, carefully and persistently. He had to make sure to keep their eyes on Haruki at all times. Poo 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 poo. Ah, it broke. He had pressed it so much that it ended up breaking it. But it should be alright. The monster parade has already begun to move. All of their aggro was on Haruki. Naturally, that includes the boss as well. But the boss' intense thirst for blood for his body, which had been fired up by Keijimitsu's speech, was suddenly extinguished. The boss aggro had disappeared. It had come to a complete stop, then turned around and headed for Kagemitsu. What on earth had just happened? He was curious. But there was no time to worry about that now. The monster parade is already merely 30 meters away from Haruki. At that rate, they would run him over. Ria, at Haruki's call, Ria opened fire. Hit them, break them, pierce them, split them open. Rat-a-tat-tat. The Boroboros started to flop onto the floor, eating a barrage of bullets. As they drew nearer, the Boroboros on the back then start to fall over their already fallen companions. Shoot 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 ba. Ria continues to attack. It was very amusing to see Ria's bullets hit monster after monster. After a short moment, a barricade of monsters was already being formed in front of Haruki. About half of the monsters that had piled up into a barricade were no longer breathing, and even those who still breathed were getting killed by the monsters on the rear as they trample over them. Any monsters who collided with the barricade from behind would get run over by the monsters behind them and suffer serious damage. Some of them would be sent flying as if they were bowling pins. There were heaps of corpses all around. Haruki was taken aback by the tremendous killing power Ria had obtained with her new divine protection. It was a fearsome power. It was completely different from what she had been able to do thus far. Then, after having committed a potato genocide, the exhausted Ria had no choice but to rest on Haruki's back. Having defeated that many monsters, it would be no surprise if this was a case of level-up sickness. The defeated monsters so far added up to about 10% of the total. So the strategy was considerably effective. But there were still plenty of monsters yet to defeat. There was no time to relax. Haruki readied his daggers. Focus, focus. Understand how much space you have by using detection. Select a target. The muscles pulse, the target's movements, the flow of the battle. Expand your brain. Avoid the attack of the Boroboro coming towards you, and counter by cutting its head clean off. With the dagger in his right hand, aim at the next coming target's heart with the dagger in his left hand. Then an arrow flew from behind him and hit the monster that was behind that one right between its eyes. Was that you, Yoshi? Haruki called out to Yoshi, who was probably hiding somewhere and providing support fire. That took 1 second. Only 1 second, and 3 Boroboros were already down. How many more seconds would they need? How many of these monsters should they kill? How far should he push his body? Haruki trembled as those thoughts appeared in his mind. A faint light passed through the monster parade. Out of the tens of thousands of possible alternatives, the best future was waiting for them. Haruki inevitably reeled that faint light in. The best moment would soon arrive. He was looking forward to it. His body shivered in anticipation. Slash, stab, evade, kick, tear apart, strike, block, kill. Woo. The source of this content November L/N, with a loud battle cry. He blew away the level-up sickness. This is different from his previous experience with the monster parade. All of the Boroboros were holding weapons. There were many and they were strong, but they didn't seem very skilled. So with a bit of guidance, they could be made to clumsily attack their own companions. If they stopped to think about what to do, they would be easy targets for Ria. And if they threw themselves recklessly into battle, they would quickly meet Haruki's blades. Haruki and Ria's movements complemented each other, so they could cover all kinds of range. This was good. This was really good. Haruki took a deep breath, as he continued to slaughter one Boroboro after another. There were those he could kill himself, and Ria would take care of those who were out of reach. And then were those Boroboros who would get confused by their movements, and end up hitting one another. Haruki took a weapon dropped by one of the Boroboros. Then he threw it at them. They were all crowding up in front of him. He didn't even need to aim. He was sure it would hit one of them. As long as the opponent had weapons, they wouldn't come to surround them as close as those monsters from the parade who didn't. Haruki would always be able to keep a distance that was suitable for daggers, so he could just relax and focus on continuing to attack. Ha ha. When he noted, he couldn't help but laugh. He laughed like he always did when he was in a different battlefield. Chapter 54. Let's be an adventurer. Defeating dungeons with a skill board. 54. Let's get back on our feet. Haruki fell to his knees as he finished killing the few remaining Boroboros. His throat hurt. His breath felt hot. It was rather unpleasant. He even coughed up a bit of blood. He moistened his sore throat with a canteen he had brought with him. Then he used the rest of it to water Ria's planter. There were no signs of any living monsters around anymore. Yoshi, who had been there up until that point, didn't seem to be there anymore either. He had surely gone to help Keijimitsu after making sure the monster parade had been completely eliminated. How would he feel after having defeated so many like this? Haruki was extremely pleased. Still, he took a deep breath. He took the medicine that Keijimitsu had given him. His wounds healed up in an instant. Not only that, his detection range was drastically increased. He was able to know Keijimitsu and the others' current situation from where he stood. This is bad. He had a rough idea of how things looked for Keijimitsu and the others over there. However, that battle didn't seem to be going so well. Keijimitsu was being pushed around by the boss. There were some members who had been unable to make a move either. At that very moment, Haruki realized that the large number of slimy eels they had set up earlier was starting to be absorbed into the dungeon. 3 hours had passed since they started this battle. It would normally take anyone more than 3 hours to defeat a single monster. Haruki took another deep breath. Then he began to run towards Keijimitsu and the others as fast as he could. When he arrived, he found Keijimitsu covered in blood and standing alone in front of the lizardman. He had been wounded all over his body by the boss' fierce attacks. He must have had no time to spare to heal himself with medicine. Van had retreated after having taken a strong attack as well. The source of this content November L/N. He might be off somewhere waiting until he's recovered, staring at the battle from afar while holding down his wounds. Yoshi was there as well, and he and Becky were attacking the boss from a distance with their arrows. However, the boss would block their attacks with its spear, its hard scales, and its tail. Daranik also attacked it from behind, but the boss tail got in the way, so her attack doesn't go as deep as planned. A group of adventurers who had explored the 24th floor could not lay a finger on this boss. That didn't mean that Keijimitsu and the others were weak. The boss was simply that strong. The boss had single-handedly overwhelmed Ariel completely. This is the true strength of a monster from the 30th floor. It seems that Masatsugu, a hero who had defeated the 30th floor, was easily able to defeat this boss. Just how in the world did he manage to do that? Haruki had absolutely no idea how they were going to defeat this guy. Just as he was caught in his thoughts, the lizardman's attack pierced into Keijimitsu's shoulder. Keijimitsu staggered, leaving himself wide open. The boss' eyes went bright with killing intent. At that very moment, the scene where Shikama and the others were brutally eaten by monsters was brought back to Haruki's mind. It brought a freezing chill down his spine. He could no longer stand there and watch. Haruki immediately took out the skill board and began to swipe. Date Mitsuru, 24 gender, male. Skill points, 34. Class, Great Sword User. Divine Protection. North Wind less than greater than. Vitality. Stamina 6. Natural Recovery 5. Strength 8. Agility. Instantaneous Power 6. Dexterity 5. Technology. Equipment Mastery. Great Sword 5. Heavy Armor 4. Intuition 5. Detection 2. Special Presence 3. Divine Protection 1. Presence. Damn. What kind of god skill is that? Haruki shook his head and hurriedly tapped on his skills. Date Mitsuru, 24 gender, male. Skill points, 34-24. Class, Great Sword User. Divine Protection, North Wind less than greater than. Vitality, Stamina 6-10. Natural Recovery 5-10. Strength 8. Agility. Instantaneous Power 6. Dexterity 5. Technology. Equipment Mastery. Great Sword 5. Heavy Armor 4-5. Intuition 5. Detection 2. Special Presence 3. Divine Protection 1. Haruki recalled the moment when Shikama and the others died in front of him. If only he hadn't hesitated to allocate skills points for them back then, they would probably still be alive. He didn't want to restrain himself from doing something that could save a life anymore. He didn't want to make the same mistake ever again. That's why this time he tampered with Keijimitsu's skills without hesitation. Though this time, he was right in the middle of combat. If his physical abilities improved all of a sudden, his body could have an adverse reaction and collapse. That's why Haruki altered only the stats that could give Keijimitsu the best survival rate without risking such a bad reaction that much. Hua! Keijimitsu let out a battle cry and suddenly moved his vulnerable body, perhaps due to Haruki's tampering. The tip of the boss spear missed Keijimitsu, who moved away in the nick of time. The boss continued to attack, but Keijamitsu avoided every single one of its thrusts. There was no sense of danger coming from his nimble movements. Would he be able to hold the boss at bay like that for a little longer? Next, Haruki opened up his own tree. Karaboshi Haruki, 27 gender, male. Skill points, 5. Class, Hidden Sword Master. Divine Protection, Cloth 1 less than greater than. Vitality, Stamina 3. Natural Recovery 2. Strength, Strength 3. Agility, Instantaneous Power 3. Dexterity 3. Technology, Equipment Mastery. One-handed Sword 3. Throwing 2. Light Armor Mastery 3. Kicking 1. Stealth 2 3. Imitating 2. Intuition, Detection 2. Special, Growth Acceleration Max. Time 1. Divine Protection 1. His stealth had improved. Why? Haruki dropped his shoulders. But this wasn't the time to feel depressed about it. There was no time to feel sad with all these incidents happening. The battlefield was already harsh enough as it was. Still shedding bitter tears, Haruki frantically cheered himself up. However, even after using up 10 of Keijamitsu's skill points, it still seemed pointless against that boss. Haruki could not imagine there would be much of a difference with his own 5 points. Still, could it be? He noticed something strange about Keijamitsu's skill tree. Why was it that even after having raised several of his skills, his divine protection was still at 1? Masatsugu had it maxed out, and he had maxed out Ria's as well. After manifesting the divine protection, Haruki could feel a great difference in his own physical abilities, and Ria's throwing ability had become something truly dreadful. Could it be that this divine protection was far more effective than he had imagined? What kind of effect did each god give? There had to be different effects depending on which god you got. A single point could mean the difference between life and death. There was no room for failure, and yet there was Ria's case. There was no waste in giving it a try. Haruki allocates 1 of his skill points to his own divine protection. Skill points, 5-4. Divine protection, Cloth 1 less than greater than. Transparent 1 less than greater than. Divine protection, 2. Jaya, transparent. It turned into transparent. This was bad, really bad. This wouldn't do. Should he stop allocating points now? No. At this point it would be better to just carry on. There was a chance the skill would change yet again if he kept on allocating points. Damn it, there was no time to be worried about it. Keijamitsu was holding down the boss with all of his might. But it was just a matter of time. Daraniko tried to attack one more time, but was blown away by the boss tail and had to step away from the battlefront. Keijamitsu seemed anxious. He was probably thinking about retreating. However, someone had to step up and take care of this. Unless they risked life and limb to defeat this boss, there would be no getting away from this situation. Just turn into whatever you want. I don't care anymore. Haruki readied himself and tapped into his skill tree with all his strength. Skill points, 4-3. Divine protection, 2 max. Huh? The name of the god appeared. Haruki put away his skill board, and took off his mask. Chapter 55.1 55 Part 1 Let's be an adventurer. Defeating dungeons with a skill board 55. He who overthrows. Keijamitsu was from the city of Date, where the historical village was located. When the adventurer profession was created, his first thought was I want to become a ninja, and for this reason, he would play around in the historical village of Date through his early childhood, to lurk in the shadows, and kill monsters oblivious to his presence. How cool would that be? Naturally, his handle name, Keijamitsu, came from this yearning to become a ninja. But contrary to his expectations, his presence would not go unnoticed wherever he would go. Updated from novel by N.com. No matter how simple he tried to look, or how much effort he would put into walking in the shadows and concealing his breath, every time someone would find him without fail, he had a really hard time feeling comfortable about being looked at by people. What would happen to Keijamitsu if he were to go to a highly populated area like Sapporo? His hair had receded from the stress of being on the receiving end of the public gaze. It became very hard for him to even step out of the apartment he had rented. However, Keijamitsu still found a way to resolve himself and go out. As he dove deeper into the dungeon, he became acquainted with others, and would often form instant teams with them. By the time the team Ariel was born, Keijamitsu had grown accustomed to other people's gazes, and his stage fright receded. When humans fall into predicaments, if they try their best, they might manage to somehow overcome them, though there was little hope for his dream of becoming a ninja. But now Keijimitsu felt that his body had gone even further beyond its limits, and was a little lighter than ever. Did some sort of hidden power awaken from its slumber because of this dire situation? Yeah, if he tried his best, he might just manage to overcome this. Still so harsh, he might have gone over his own limits. But the situation wasn't getting much better. The Grim Reaper is still loitering around. He was very aware of how strong this boss was. Even from a distance, you could see Keijimitsu shivering. He didn't think this would end simply by crossing swords with the boss. But their main source of damage was their long-distance attacks. He had never thought that Becky's arrows would not be effective. After such a long battle, Keijimitsu was still unable to deliver the final blow. And to make matters worse, both Van and Aranika were out for the count. It was quite the predicament. He had no choice but to admit that things weren't looking so good for them. He hadn't been able to do any critical damage to the boss so far. His attacks had connected, however, they hadn't done much more than a scratch. Due to the great sword's characteristic high attack power, even a single good hit could turn the battle in their favor. But the boss was very wary of Keijimitsu's attacks. Because of this, he was having a hard time landing his attacks on it. If he was too careless when trying to land an attack, he could leave himself exposed to a fatal counterattack. Damn it! All he needed was a single blow. Keijimitsu grit his teeth, facing the reality in front of him with a fleeting hope. Wouldn't it be nice if Van and Daraniko were to return to the battle? The members of Ariel were carrying some pretty expensive medicine with them. By taking that medicine, they should be able to return to the battlefield soon, as long as their wounds weren't too deep. However, even after some time had passed, they did not return. They weren't dead. He could feel their presence, so it was fine. Could it be that they were so badly injured that the medicine wasn't enough to get them back in shape yet? Or could it be that they had already ran out of medicine by the time they had retreated? For how long would he have to fight this boss by himself? Keijimitsu was about to be crushed down by that pressure. Should he try to escape? But how was he going to do that? In order to escape from this lizardman, someone would have to sacrifice themselves and try to hold him down while the others escape. In that case, should he be the one to do it? He didn't want to die. Of course, Keijimitsu had no intention to commit suicide. But still, his important friends were there with him. They had been supporting one another since their time as low-rank adventurers, and becoming stronger together. Sometimes they would laugh, sometimes they would cry. He had managed to make such precious friends. Keijimitsu was okay with throwing away his life if it meant it could save his friends. It was the blood of the warrior that coursed through his veins that made him feel that way. As the name suggests, the city of Date was located in the land in the Sendai territory where Date Kunoshige had once settled down. Date, after being impoverished as a result of the Tohoku War during the Meiji Restoration, sold off his household belongings and pioneered to the northern parts of Japan. It was a particularly unique mass migration. The settlement was filled with trees and the fields were not in a good condition to grow food. The lands would become covered in snow during the winter, and everything would freeze over. He abandoned his personal property and was able to survive by cooperating with his retainers in rigorous field work. The way Date Kunoshige had felt about his retainers, and how he saw them as companions he fought together with in order to survive, truly inspired Keijimitsu. Adventurers should be prepared to die at any time. Of course, that didn't mean he should throw his life away in vain. There was a time where one could give his life away. He was resolved to happily die for those he wanted to protect. An adventurer should find something worth dying for. It was time to prepare himself. He swung his great sword so as to intimidate the enemy. Everyone, leave this to me and run. Run away. He couldn't even finish saying that. Gwah! A huge needle-like weapon pierced through the boss' eyes. Was that throwing? But who? Keijimitsu furrowed his brow as he headed for an attack. Its right eye had been completely crushed. As for its left eye, the boss seemed to have managed to protect it somehow just in time. Though its eyelids had been severely damaged, blood was flowing out of the needle's handle. No, it looked almost like a bow shuriken. It was a kind of iron dart that ninjas and assassins would throw at their opponents to make them bleed out. Chapter 55.2 55 Part 2. But who on earth could have possibly thrown that? There were no members who could throw bow shurikens. Could it have been Air? Keijimitsu quickly looked around, but could find no signs of a strange mask. He probably was still fighting the monster parade. None of the small monsters were heading his way, so he was certainly not dead. But was Air okay? The fact that the lizardman's eyes had been disabled allowed Keijimitsu to think about things outside of his own battle. In this situation, would they be able to escape without having to sacrifice anyone? Keijimitsu was still trying to figure out how to escape from the battle. Suddenly, a piece of the lizardman's scales was sent flying from behind its back, and a small laceration appeared on its tail, which so far had only been as much as scratched over a few times! After seeing that, Keijimitsu's intention to escape disappeared. Was it Daraniko, or perhaps Van? He didn't know what happened behind the lizardman's back. But this was a great opportunity. The boss turned around and away from Keijimitsu's face. "Where do you think you're going?" Keijimitsu enhanced his presence, gaining the boss aggro. This was Keijimitsu's special ability, the one that he so far had not revealed to Air. There was nothing like it. It was Ariel's advantage. Taunt. With it, he can freely manipulate the monster's aggression and keep their formations undisturbed, no matter how much they are attacked from the rear. If they can control the monster's formation, then they can control the flow of the battle. This was Ariel's most important skill in their quest to conquer the dungeon. Affected by his taunt, the boss once again turns to face Keijimitsu. "Take this." Keijimitsu mustered up all of his strength and slashed at the boss. However, he missed. Still, Keijimitsu did not lose hope. There's no need to panic, even if his attacks don't hit, because one of his companions was relentlessly attacking the monster from its rear. This is how Ariel could decide a battle. The ones in charge of dealing damage could do so freely, without worrying themselves about attracting aggro from their targets. With this, they could even take down a monster of a higher grade than them. But then, he got distracted. NGH? He took a vicious attack from the boss. It was getting even angrier than before. Now that it was sustaining damage, it was also growing impatient since it could not fight back against the one hurting it from behind because of Keijimitsu's taunt. The lizardman's attack was fierce. However, Keijimitsu was able to withstand it. When Keijimitsu turned to his full defense mode, not even the lizardman's attacks could break through his defenses that easily. That was also a given. After all, Keijimitsu's job was to attract the monster's attention. He had been the team member who had received the most attacks for years. When Keijimitsu fully devoted himself to defense, he would not go down easily. His body, which seemed to have gone beyond its own limits, forgot about its own fatigue and pain, and simply moved so as to survive. A single mistake could mean death, but even under those circumstances, Keijimitsu kept his cool and continued to make the right choices. The boss attacks were getting more and more violent. Even though he was guarding, he was gradually sustaining damage bit by bit. Still, Keijimitsu kept his cool and continued to take on its attacks. Their chance to win would come for sure, that's what he believed. Then, the moment had finally arrived. Several splintered scales scattered away from the lizardman's back. Its tail, which hadn't sustained any serious damage up until then, had been cut off clean from its root, and was dancing in the air. After taking off his mask, Haruki threw 4 handicraft pikes. Out of those 4 pikes, which had been a drop from an earlier boss, 2 had plunged themselves into the lizardman's eyes. It managed to block the other 2, but it didn't matter. Since it had lost one of its eyes, the lizardman's fighting capabilities had been reduced. Keijimitsu, who had been pushed around by it until that point, was finally able to stand up to it. After making sure Keijimitsu was recovering some of his lost ground, Haruki employed all of his power to sneak behind the boss back. He wanted to attack the lizardman quickly. He wanted to help Keijimitsu at all costs. However, with Haruki's ability, getting in front of the monster would mean risking taking one of its powerful attacks. A single mistake, and he could be dying for nothing. That's why Haruki carefully looked at the boss from behind! Haruki grit his teeth. He had to make his best efforts not to give in to his impatience. A stream of light burst out. Focus, focus, observe, remember, imagine, and guess its movements. Carefully carve its patterns into your head over and over again. Novel by N. Com. The path became hazy. A power that went beyond his expectations. It was interfering with Haruki's scrutiny. A little more. Its methods, its habits, its patterns. Find them, no matter what. He was reaching the limits of his ability to concentrate. Flow. The world was moving frame by frame. Then, his expectation and the way ahead finally met. At that exact moment, Haruki made his move. A second extended into eternity. His dagger met with the lizardman's tail, which it had been moving constantly behind its back. But it was too hard. With Haruki's level of training, he was unable to put a single dent on it. However, Haruki kept on slashing at it. Was it reacting to it being damaged? The tail quickly approached Haruki, but that was something he had seen coming. Haruki changed his position without even looking at the incoming tail. The boss attack whiffed, hitting nothing at all. The tail went sideways, missing Haruki by an inch. It made a crushing sound as it slashed through the air. Even though that single attack could have killed Haruki right there, he wasn't scared at all. Without even flinching, Haruki kept on attacking. Ria was constantly attacking the tail as well. Ria's bullets were scraping off the boss scales little by little. Haruki dauntlessly put all of his strength in his hands. Then, this is it. He could feel it. It was crystal clear. Haruki's blade plunged into the lizardman's tail, which until then had successfully repelled each and every one of his attacks. The fact that he had increased his technology score by 1 had nothing to do with that. Such a small increase would still not allow him to punch through such armored scales. Chapter 55.3 55 Part 3. There was a simple reason why his attack had worked. It was the thin stream of light he could see after gaining a new divine protection. It flickered in all directions. It suddenly shone where there was nothing at all. It remained lit for a split second. The light flashed on various places. Back when he was dealing with the Boroboros, Haruki would not be able to see it unless he was in an extremely focused state. But now that his divine protection had been increased to max, things were different. Just by concentrating a bit, that light flickered clearly in front of him. It would be a fantastic thing to see, were it not for the fact that he was in the middle of battle. The light would shine brightly whenever Haruki was aware of it, and when he paid little attention to it, it would vanish. When he couldn't see the light, his attacks would do no damage. But when attacked the path shown by the light as it shone over the lizardman's tail, the blade went through. It was as if the light told him where to cut, like it knew the lizardman's exact weak spots. In fact, the moment Haruki increased his divine protection to max, a new skill had appeared on his tree: Intuition. Detection 2. Weak Point Exploit 0 New. With the appearance of that new skill, Haruki was able to consistently aim for the point that light would lead him to, that is, his opponent's weak spots. Keeping the lights flickering in mind, Haruki continued his relentless attacks. The light would go off just as quickly as it appeared, so he had to react quickly to it in order for his attacks to work. Since this light represented weak spots and openings, there had to be some kind of pattern. With that in mind, Haruki could predict the monster's movements and attack accordingly. That's why he had to observe the boss from behind, to analyze and predict his movements. As Haruki's head kept on working at full speed, he kept on attacking the monster in quick succession. Then, a certain tendency gradually became more and more evident. Whenever the boss attacked, a bright light would shine at the root of its tail. Perhaps it was some kind of habit of the lizardman. As soon as he became aware of that, Haruki immediately increased the frequency of his attacks. As he continued to unleash his attacks, Haruki waited for the right moment. The lizardman attacked. At that precise moment, it happened again. A bright light shone at the base of its tail. Haruki cut right at that precise spot with all his strength. The light flickered. Then it vanished, and the tail was dancing in the air, separated from its body. The lizardman, too, seemed surprised to have sustained that kind of damage. Despite being in the middle of battle, its body shivered, and took its eyes away from Keijimitsu for a split second. Then, Keijimitsu's single attack exploded. Keijimitsu's greatsword hit the lizardman's neck directly. The scales on its neck stopped its momentum, but Keijimitsu kept pushing in. The lizardman's head separated from its torso as blood gushed out. The boss stood there as a statue for a brief moment, and then slowly fell on its back. Follow current novels on Novelb, in Keijimitsu let out a cry that sounded like a beast's roar. Then the other members of Ariel joined in the outcry. Alright. A masked Haruki appeared behind the fallen lizardman's back, raising his fist in celebration for their victory. The reason why they had been able to damage the lizardman this time was because he had raised his divine protection to max. Haruki had thought that the ability that was to be strengthened depended on the god that one received as divine protection grew in power. However, he had no idea just how powerful Ria's throwing ability would become after obtaining as her divine protection. He had no way of knowing if maxing out his own divine protection would give him something he could use against the boss. It had been a gamble, and one with pretty bad odds. But Haruki had won the bet. Divine protection, invisible one less than greater than overthrowing God. Completely covered in cloth, his body is unseen. The one who overthrows while remaining hidden from sight. He was another god in ancient Egyptian religion. He had responded to Haruki's expectations. He was more than suitable for helping Haruki defeat monsters. And he had been just as Haruki had expected. Medjed's divine protection had granted him the incredible ability to pinpoint and exploit his opponent's weak spots. Those weak spots would appear as a flickering light. It was linked to a passage in the Book of the Dead, in which Medjed is said to shoot rays of light from his eyes. Haruki earnestly hoped that light would never shine upon himself. As he was thinking about that, an intense pain began to course through Haruki's body. It felt as if his body would split apart at any second. The pain was so severe that it made him seriously think that was it level-up sickness? But this pain was on a completely different level than he had ever experienced. Haruki fell on his knees as he grit his teeth in a desperate attempt to remain conscious. However, his efforts were in vain, and his consciousness faded into darkness. Give it your all. Let's beat dungeon with all we've got. Topic 216 Urgent 112 Name, Anonymous Challenger. Let's discuss the rampage of that masked guy in Chikaho. 113 Name, Anonymous Challenger. Who? There's a topic about Chikaho so posted there. 114 Name, Anonymous Challenger. Chikaho's monster parade was the stampede type. The aerials led by Keijimitsu had cleared it. 115 Name, Anonymous Challenger. So Ariel is now able to defeat a monster parade? That's amazing. 116 Name, Anonymous Challenger. Actually the one to defeat the monster parade was another dude. Ariel themselves only defeated its boss. So during the monster parade, that masked guy was pretty much alone the whole time. 117 Name, Anonymous Challenger. Huh? He did it solo. 118 Name, Anonymous Challenger. Ariel and that masked guy seem to have done a pretty good job. The local thread about it is on fire. 119 Name, Masatsugu. Yo, looks like this is going to be another great topic. 120 Name, Anonymous Challenger. 119. He's here. Alive after all. Huh? 121 Name, Masatsugu. Fortunately yes. Of course everyone else is fine too. 122 Name, Anonymous Challenger. Everyone no way. 123 Name, Masatsugu. Everybody loves bacon. I'm currently on medical treatment. 124 Name, Anonymous Challenger. I get all puffed up during medical treatment. So you got food poisoning for eating bad bacon? 125 Name, Anonymous Challenger. Oh, but I'm glad you're fine. It's been a while so I was a bit worried. I should have expected this from the hero who can recover both Shinjuku from monsters, and himself from bad bacon. 126 Name, Masatsugu. 125. Sorry, we couldn't recover Shinjuku. 127 Name, Anonymous Challenger. So you only recovered from food poisoning? 128 Name, Masatsugu. That was just the end result. I tried to defeat the Stampede's boss but, sorry, I had to run away. Chapter 56. Let's be an adventurer. Defeating dungeons with a skill board. 56. A day in a certain heroine's life. She started talking to herself. I'm a little anxious. I feel a bit lonely when I'm in this room by myself. Somewhere in Hokkaido. She was in a room on the second floor of a house surrounded by a rural landscape. Ria, 0 occupation, adventurer, self-proclaimed. She was basking in the sunlight that had just begun to show through the window. What are you doing right now? Eating. She spoke with very few words. She was more enthusiastic about catching the first sweet rays of morning sunlight. After entrusting her body to the sunlight for a while, she took some water from a nearby bucket and gently poured it over her soil. By doing this, she would prevent the soil in her planter from drying up. After watering herself, she once again focused on the sunlight. The sun's gaze was very earnest. Roughly 1 hour after sunrise, a certain man came into the room. His face was covered with a mask, and his head had feathers on it. The rest of his body was kind of hard to see well. His presence, aside from his mask and his feathers, was rather faint. Good morning, Ria. At first glance, one could very well mistake this man for a monster or a demon. But he was her partner. The man put her in his bag. That bag, which hung from the man's back, was where she did her work. She placed her hand on the man, like a driver would on a driver's seat of a car. Her face was full of motivation for whatever work she had to do moving forward. As they left the house, they met with a woman. That woman was one of the man's teammates. Rhea began to threaten that woman. She did that in order to clearly establish the difference in their positions. Huh? What's wrong? The masked man quickly noticed that and turned to her. So she quickly lightened the mood. She would do her first threat of the morning without having the man notice. That was how high her level of professionalism was. She was going to some place called Dungeon. It was a dangerous place everybody knew about. This dungeon was a place where one could very well lose their life. People who set foot there are called adventurers. Tilda, why do you do such a dangerous job? Tilda. If I let him go by himself, he might get careless and end up dying. Like his guardian. Whenever a monster appeared, the man would attack it. She had to support this man so that he would never get injured. Her job was to eliminate all dangers that would approach that man. She would stave off any offensive headed towards him by firing her bullets in quick succession. The man then would have free rein to move around as he pleased. As the man moved, she would quickly assess the situation while sitting inside his bag, and shoot her bullets with extreme accuracy. She was devoted to never have to let the masked man move a single finger. Her attacks were unmatched. She was a professional at her job. Today, the masked man was able to return from the dungeon unharmed. However, she didn't seem pleased about it. She had the strict look of a professional on her face. This was a critical moment for her. After having returned from the dungeon, she had to return home with him safely, without any incidents happening. She could not let that woman get close to the masked man. To eliminate all dangers approaching that man was her job. Not a single fly could get close. Her leaves gradually turned into sharp thorns. Have you had dinner already, Karen? Yes. Wait. The voice of a generic merchant woman roared from a distance. Out of all of these women, Rhea considered this one to be a stupid child. Could I borrow her for a second? The stupid child pointed at the woman. What's wrong? I made a mistake when I was taking measurements. Measurements? Yeah. The area around the chest ended up being too big, you know? The woman reacted with a painful expression, as if the stupid child's words had punched through her heart. I just have to make sure it fits you perfectly. I see. Karen, do you think you could spare a moment for that? Yeah, sure. Okay then, let's go. The stupid child took the woman away. After seeing that, Rhea grasped her leaves tightly. The thorny mood had been softened. Being at that level of peace and quiet, her job was done for the day. For the first time that day, a smile floated about on Rhea's face. After she went back home, she entrusted her body to the last few rays of sunlight left for the day, until the sun had completely sunk down under the horizon. Even though her work was over for the day, she still continued to fight a lonely battle. Managing one's physical condition was essential for adventurers. She would go to sleep as soon as the sun had gone down completely. Still, she couldn't sleep right away. I'm a little anxious. I feel a bit lonely when I'm in this room by myself. A breathing sound echoed through the dark, lonely room. It sounded almost like a sigh. Are you still awake, Rhea? Light came in dashing into the dark room. The masked man approached her and extended his hand towards her. Visit novelbin.com for the best novel reading experience. She always allowed this man to touch her. She would sometimes pet the back of the man's hand as if remembering something, but the man would gladly accept her touch. Occasionally, the man would come visit her in her room just like this. It was only on those nights that she would be able to sleep soundly and peacefully. This was the final question for her. Tilda, do you think this life is difficult? Tilda. I do. I kind of want it to stop. But there's no world where everyone is always happy and everything goes smoothly all the time. Happiness is something that appears always for a brief moment. To experience those very moments, that's what's worth living for. Chapter 57. Not really a chapter, but I am not the author. Let's be an adventurer. Tilda defeating dungeons with a skill board. 57. The garage dungeon's food situation. Onion, B2F. It releases a tear gas, synpropantheoless oxide, when cut, blurring its attacker's vision. Ways to counter this tear gas include subjecting the onion to cold, breathing through the mouth while cutting it, and not cutting it at all. Its seedlings look exactly like those of the bunching onion. The average untrained eye would be unable to tell them apart. Hokkaido is the #1 producer of onions in Japan. Common species, yellow onion. Garage dungeon's endemic species, Sapporo yellow, smooth red. Potato, B4F, a covert species that mimics the dungeon's walls. It shoots potato bullets from a short distance. A self-sacrifice type that shaves off pieces of itself in order to attack. The kanji in its Japanese name, Shagaimo, include the characters for horse and bell. The reason for that being that potatoes seem to resemble the bells that usually hung from horses' necks. It goes without saying, but Hokkaido is the #1 producer of potatoes in Japan. Common species: Irish cobbler. Garage Dungeon's endemic species: Mayqueen, Kituakari. Eggplant, B6F. The common eggplant found in Hokkaido. Despite it being quite a predominant vegetable, Hokkaido is actually the worst producer of eggplants in all of Japan. It releases sharp barbs from its stem when prodded, which are harmful to the touch. In ancient times, these sharpened stems were used to remove hardened warts. An unfortunate species believed to have no nutritional value. A few years ago, it was found that it was actually quite nutritious, so it has been trying to regain its popularity. Common species: rice eggplant. Garage Dungeon's endemic species: Nun. Koko, B7F. A monster commonly seen in the market for use as food. They are usually hunted down by adventurers who prefer to hunt for a living instead of conquering the dungeon. Not being able to do much other than nervously flap their wings make them an easy target for rookie adventurers. They are famous for their game fowl and cochin variants. Common species: chicken, Gallus domesticus. Garage Dungeon's endemic species: Nun. Melon, B8F. A monster that has 3 perfectly round fruits attached to a stretched ivy. A self-sacrifice type that attacks by firing the seeds those fruits contain. In the production areas, melons are cut in half and eaten just like that. However, children tend to prefer watermelons to melons. Contrary to popular belief, Hokkaido is not the #1 producer of melons. Common species: muskmelon. Garage Dungeon's endemic species: Yubari King, Kirara Queen of Elbayen. References: Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, homepage. Takiai Seedco, Limited, / and others. Help with data collection, Farmer S and Family. Thank you very much. Chapter 58.1 Testing out using dialog box style for translations. Feedback will be very much appreciated. Sponsored by DC. 58 Part 1 Let's be an adventurer. Defeating dungeons with a skill board. 58 Prologue. Following him around like a shadow. The day Haruki left for Sapporo, Karen headed towards the garage dungeon feeling a chill down her spine. That ranker, Keigemitsu, had called for Haruki's help in taking on the monster parade. Only Haruki. Karen had not been invited to the party. There was no helping the fact that she couldn't go with him. Haruki had defeated other monster parades in the past. On the other hand, Karen had yet to accomplish as much herself. All she was doing was staying behind Haruki and drinking sweet juice. She had been blessed, but still had achieved nothing but failures. Even though she says she wants to go with him, it's only out of selfishness. Though she did follow him around, she didn't have the ability to be on par with him. She truly felt useless. With that in mind, Karen timidly saw Haruki off. He was climbing to the apex of adventurers with an incredible amount of momentum. Karen couldn't help but think that even if she were to give it her all, she would still feel helpless next to him. Still, that didn't mean that Karen was giving up. She couldn't give up. She had to one day be able to repay Haruki's favor. If she had time to sulk, then she had time to go to the dungeon and hone her skills. She had to become stronger so that she could be of help to Haruki. So a ray of hope was reflected in Karen's eyes. It was a change caused by the divine protection that had manifested when she was in the middle layers of the dungeon. Magic was tremendously easier to use than before. She could see glimpses of a new power welling up within her. She'd make sure to make this new power hers by the time Haruki returned. Fueled up by that enthusiasm, Karen headed towards the garage dungeon. This chapter is updated by November. elbin.com. After leveling up a bit in the dungeon, Karen went back to the prefab. Inside, Akane, who had lost herself to the room's temperature, was melting behind the counter. Akane, welcome. Karen, is air. Karen had never called him by his name in front of Akane. She was sure Akane didn't really care about that. Slightly biting her lips, Karen presented today's results. Akane, so you can hunt by yourself, huh? Karen, of course. Akane, and here I was, thinking all you did was follow him around like a shadow, doing nothing but drink juice behind him. The way Akane was talking to her was beginning to irritate Karen. She could feel her head heat up. It was just cheap provocation. She knew that much. Karen consciously took a few deep breaths so as to calm herself down. Karen, I'm an intermediate adventurer too, you know. Akane, oh, sure. How about you start considering retirement? Karen, huh? Retirement? Unable to read the intention behind Akane's words, Karen became stiff. Akane, aren't you Air's girlfriend? Karen, and no way. Akane, then what? Are you just a regular team member? Air is a sweetheart and says nothing about this, but I've seen you do nothing but cling on his kindness like some kind of leech. Can you really call yourself an adventurer when like that? Karen, Akane, I don't know what Air will be like from now on. But have you thought about the possibility that you'll be nothing but a burden to him in the future? Karen, Akane, if you have, then think about what you'll do from now on. There was a certain meaning behind Akane's words. There was no telling how much stronger Haruki having a skill board and all would become in the future. He might even be able to push all other adventurers aside and become one of the top rankers. Karen could sense that Haruki was such a talented man. Surely Akane, who had come across several adventurers in her life, would understand that better than anyone else. She would know for sure about Karaboshi Haruki's potential. But Karen could never let herself be swayed by her words. Karen, you have no right to say something like that. This was something between Haruki and Karen. It was no place for anyone to poke their nose into. Akane had bluntly stepped into it like it was her business, which made Karen to become infuriated. The staff in her hand was brimming with power. Her magical power gushed out from her body along with her rage, and that power, splash, Akane, had gone and crushed a box of tangerines. Akane, Mitsuru. Akane made a shriek like a frog would when stomped on, and held the tangerine box close to her chest. Mitsuru? Akane, my poor Mitsuru. Karen, the word Mitsuru was printed on one side of the box. So Mitsuru was that box's name? But why would you name a tangerine box Mitsuru anyway? The seemingly overreacting Akane scowled at Karen. Akane, what have you done to my dear Mitsuru? Karen, I am sorry. Akane, sorry? Do you have any idea how important Mitsuru was to me? Akane clenched her fist as if trying to prevent her anger from exploding. Chapter 58.2 58 Part 2. Why was she so tilted anyway? Karen was unable to understand the importance of that tangerine box. Akane, get out this instant. Well, have a duel. It'll clear away the pain of having lost my dear Mitsuru. Karen, sure. Certainly. It had been Karen's fault that Mitsuru that tangerine box got crushed. But a duel, battles between fellow adventurers were strictly forbidden. However, there was no way to prosecute such battles as long as they could be considered sparring. To make matters worse, they were in a rural area. Even if their duel were to be discovered, it was very unlikely it would be handled like a serious problem. Akane was already moving her body and heading outside of the prefab. She was already pretty worked up. Karen, on the other hand, had calmed down, but was utterly confused. What should I do? Akane isn't stopping any time soon. Akane, what, are you scared already? Or could it be that you're still waiting for Air to come and save you? Karen, no. She denied it. But she also felt as if she had been read like an open book. Could it be that you're still waiting for Air to come and save you? Those words pierced through her chest like a sharp knife. Deep down, she wanted Haruki to come help her. She hated herself for her naivety and dependence. Akane, if I win, you'll have to get me a new tangerine box. Karen, yes. Why was she making such a fuss about a tangerine box? There was no point thinking about that. She was getting sick of her bickering. Could it be that this was Akane's plan? Akane was starting to be convinced of this. They stood in the road in front of the prefab, about 20 meters from one another and facing each other. Akane, alright, I'm ready whenever you are. Come get some. Karen, why did this have to happen? Those were Karen's innermost thoughts. But this was also a big chance for her. She had the opportunity to show Akane just how strong she was. Akane was a rather famous person, known for being a store clerk who also knew how to fight. She had found and raised countless rookie adventurers in the past. Some of them had even become as strong as rankers, and others were now actually rankers themselves. She would be able to show her power to someone like that, and let it be recognized. She might even be recognized as someone worthy of being close to Haruki. After all, that's why Karen had been honing her skills. Had her new divine protection brought about a god that would empower her magical abilities? Ever since getting this divine protection, Karen had been able to handle magic outside the dungeon more easily. She would secure victory with this newfound power. She would get the recognition she deserved. Karen raised her staff, and swung it down with all her might. Then, a magical clean hit, right on Aken's face. Then, she fell flat and face up on the ground. Are you okay? The duel couldn't be over already, or could it? It had been quite the clean hit. Even Karen was worried it had ended up being too much. Wait, did she die? Akane. Pwa. The source of this content: November LBN. Karen, alive. Akane, why you've hit me from so far away. That's cheating. Karen, no, I'm not cheating. Akane, you have a blunt weapon and yet you hit me from that far away. That didn't count. It didn't count. Karen, phew. Akane was stomping her feet on the ground like a spoiled child. Karen never said she would take her on hand-to-hand combat. Akane must have misunderstood. But even if she were to try to explain that for her, Akane, forget about this. Let's go. Karen, huh? Where? Akane, to the dungeon. Suddenly, Akane grabbed Karen by her right wrist. Karen, wait. Karen's eyes opened wide in surprise. What on earth? Karen hadn't noticed that Akane had gotten that close to her so quickly, and she was pulling her arm with an impressive amount of strength. Even though she had been hit clean in the face a few moments ago, Akane seemed uninjured, aside from a slightly red nose. This person is strong. A cold shiver ran down Karen's spine. Akane, look, we're going straight down to the 10th floor. Karen, and then, what? Akane, we'll have a hunting competition, of course. Karen, of course? She no longer had any intention to continue with this duel. Akane approached a confused Karen. Akane, you want to be helpful to Air, right? With that kind of magic. Karen, Akane, in that case, I should show you a bit of my true power. I could even give you some advice in order to make you stronger. In that case. But wait, did that mean that Akane had recognized her skills? Reluctantly, Karen followed Akane. Though she wouldn't have been able to escape Akane's strong grasp on her wrist even if she had wanted to. After that, the two of them headed towards the dungeon's 10th floor, full steam ahead. However, shortly after reaching their destination, they made up their differences and left before even starting their hunting competition. Chapter 59.1 59 Part 1 Let's be an adventurer. Defeating dungeons with a skill board 59. Let's wipe our tears away and resume our exploration. Upon returning to K-Town, Haruki found himself staring distantly towards the hotel. A lot of sad events had happened. After having exterminated the monster parade, Haruki and Ariel went to the Heroes Bar. Drinks were on Ariel. It had been a hard work's day. They were entitled to enjoy some delicious sake. Sadly, Haruki couldn't have more than a single mug himself. Huh? Going back home already? Aren't you gonna drink that? Well, don't mind if I do. Okay, where do we go after here? The night is still young. Air's not coming with us. But oh well. Ariel's high detection abilities could barely notice that Haruki had not been wearing his mask. Though the alcohol wouldn't let anyone from Ariel, Keijamitsu included, pay too much attention to Haruki. Yup, it was the alcohol, no doubt. He didn't want to remove his mask just because he was going to grab a few drinks. The beer he had ordered would be snatched away, and no one would notice him even if he were to call out to the others. The green beans at the Heroes Bar were too salty. That wasn't the only sad event. Karaboshi Haruki, 27, gender, male. Skill points, 3-6. Class, Hidden Sword Master. Divine Protection, Overthrowing God. Vitality, Stamina 3. Natural Recovery 2. Strength 3-4. Agility, Instantaneous Power 3-4. Dexterity 3-4. Technology, Equipment Mastery. One-Handed Sword 3. Throwing 2. Light Armor Mastery 3. Kicking 1. Stealth 3. Imitating 2. Intuition. Detection 2. Weak Point Exploit 01. Special, Growth Acceleration Max. Time 1. Divine Protection Max. Could it be that the world was making the wrong choices for Haruki? Against Haruki's will, his skills and his own presence were getting closer to those of an assassin. That was not what he had been aiming for. After exterminating the monster parade, Keijamitsu mentioned Haruki in his blog. On top of that, he even went and added a link to Haruki's own blog at the end of his post. Now a lot more people would be visiting his blog. But contrary to that expectation, the number of views on Haruki's blog hadn't increased that much. Even when looking at the analytics, The link on Kagemitsu's blog hadn't been followed that much. Come on. Haruki was at his wit's end, sobbing in his hotel room. Even though that link stood out the most, why had no one visited his own blog? Haruki could not figure out the reason. Why? My blog was promoted by a celebrity and all. Haruki was in low spirits. Of course, it wasn't all bad things. Good stuff had happened, too. Unrelated to Kagemitsu's blog entry, the number of bookmarks on Haruki's blog had been multiplied by 5. He wasn't sure exactly why his bookmarks had gone up by that much, but he had some ideas. This was the happiest Haruki had been ever since going to Chikaho. Seeing his increased number of bookmarks moved Haruki to tears. At last, I feel like I have a strong presence. Though that assumption of his could be completely denied by Kagemitsu's next post. Lastly, a nice piece of equipment had appeared when cutting up the defeated lizardmen. Why were all drops from rare monsters found in their stomach? It had been the same with that centipede from before. Even though getting a rare item should be something to be happy about, the girls from Ariel were turning their faces away as if they were about to throw up. It was a coat covered with lizardman scales. Its defensive power was higher than centipede shells, though it was still considered light armor. Hitting the scales produced a sound similar to striking on iron plating, but it still felt relatively lightweight. It was quite a nice thing to have. After Ariel had discussed amongst themselves about it, they decided to give Haruki the lizardman coat. After all, he was the only one who could actually equip it. The drop was from a monster from the 30th floor, and the highest Ariel had reached was the 24th floor. They were barely there at the right level, but still none of them was able to equip it. It was the same reason why a great sword user can't equip a dagger. They simply didn't have the required aptitude to equip it. That lizardman coat was an excellent piece of equipment for Haruki. Not only he was given the coat, he could actually equip it. Could that be thanks to his divine protection as well? Haruki's divine protection, Overthrow God, used to be Cloth 1 at LV1, so as the name implies, there could have been some hidden effect that benefited him in that regard. Haruki's guess was that this effect could have been increases aptitude and lowers the level requirement for equipping cloth-based equipment, or something like that. Visit novelbin.com for the best novel reading experience. If his guess were to be correct, he should be able to equip any piece of equipment as long as it's cloth-based, even the ones that would be considered too strong for his current level. That would be a fantastic effect. Still, there seemed to be only a few pieces of cloth-based equipment. That effect would then be rather niche, but it would still be worth having. Incidentally, his divine protection at LV2 was transparent 1. Transparent. That divine protection's effect stated that it dramatically raised aptitude. In that case, it would appear that Haruki's divine protection was insanely powerful. After leaving his luggage in his room, Haruki headed for the prefab. At a distance, the prefab's front seemed to be distorted due to it being exposed to the intense midsummer heat. It looked like a heated-up iron plate. Wiping the sweat off his forehead, Haruki opened the door of the prefab. It was much hotter inside. Almost like a sauna. Two women were trembling and weeping inside. They were Karen and Akane. Chapter 59.2 59 Part 2. Karen was sitting in a corner of the prefab, holding her knees as she cried. And Akane was a complete wreck. Her face had abandoned her. She was truly unsightly. What on earth happened? Enduring the intense heat, Haruki quickly opened a window. The warm air from outside rapidly enters the prefab, clearing away the sweltering heat that had been trapped inside. Karen had finally lifted her head. Still? She suddenly gulped, and her face stiffened. I see you've become much stronger again, haven't you? Karen nodded as if she had realized something. Much stronger? Though a bit astonished, Haruki approached Karen. What happened? That's right. Please help us. The dungeon's 10th floor is too dangerous for us. Haruki headed to the garage dungeon with Karen, who kept on saying how dangerous it was over and over. So why are you tagging along, anyway? Oh, don't mind me. Akane, who was wearing heavy armor, got close to Karen. Her armor had the kanji for number 1 engraved on it. It was a piece of equipment that enhanced the wearer's agility, despite being considered heavy armor. Haruki didn't know what kind of materials were used to make that kind of armor, but he knew about the number 1 series. Wearing that would be beyond even Haruki's ability. And yet this chapter is updated by novelbin.com. Looking at her weapon, Haruki frowned. What's an Iakaibashi employee doing with a Banma weapon? Her weapon had the IBA logo, while her forearm guard was made by the Banma studio. There was a blade attached to the elbow of that forearm guard. This blade could be used as a tonfa to attack enemies. It was a very rare weapon. An Iakaibashi employee, aren't you? Won't having a Banma weapon get you in trouble? I have no choice. Iakaibashi doesn't make weapons like these. Weapons like these, the products made by Banma Studio, are quite peculiar. To begin with, their concepts for weapon and armor design are weird. For example, that weapon Akane has looks like someone overdid its design, thinking something much like so, a tonfa that rotates so. Let's add a jet engine to it. Its weapon part will be jet engine blades. As a result, this weird weapon was completed. A jet engine blade attached to a forearm guard. While the blade can be used to attack, it can also be used as a shield. It was sold as a weapon that integrates both offensive and defensive capabilities, but since it looked so hard to use, one would expect its sales wouldn't go that well. Nonetheless, despite their weird ideas, Banma had earned a considerable amount of fans. If Banma were to suit Sumyone's needs, they simply could not use any other products other than Banma's. Akane was probably like that, too. It was true that the more conservative Iakaibashi could not make crazy weapons like these. Haruki glanced at both Karen and Akane. Why was Akane walking so close to Karen? He didn't remember them being so intimate. When exactly had they become this friendly to each other? Once again wearing something weird yourself. Is that lizardman armor? Did you notice? The scales were a dead giveaway. How good is it? Akane got closer to Haruki and started to inspect his coat. It has a considerable defense against slashing attacks. Still, it's a cloth-type equipment, so you should be careful about blunt attacks. Does it have any special abilities? Do you want a detailed appraisal? If only I had time for that. He just got this piece of equipment after a difficult battle. Haruki just wanted to go out there and try it out in battle, rather than waiting an entire month for an appraisal. Still, that mask, those feathers, those potatoes, and now this coat. Just what are you trying to become? Of course, I want to be an adventurer as strong as a ranker. After being subject to Akane's cold stare, Haruki activated the gate and tried to set it to the 10th floor. Apparently Akane had already set it to the 10th floor beforehand. When did you come to the dungeon? Just a few moments ago. Is it okay for a store clerk to get into the dungeon? It's not that I can't. Of course I can't set up shop there. But in the dungeon, I can get various new abilities. I can also get information on how to best deal with its many monsters. And by knowing these monsters' abilities, I can recommend suitable gear to other adventurers. That's why Iakaibashi employees are encouraged to come into the dungeon from time to time. I see. I understand why you come here, but is it okay for you to leave the store alone? Nobody comes in anyway. We'll be reducing our business hours during weekdays. Isn't that too carefree of her? Haruki's face became stiff. But the truth was that the only ones to go to the prefab on weekdays were Haruki and his friends. So reducing business hours wouldn't be much of a problem anyway. So why did you come to the dungeon earlier? I had a fight with Karen. So, a fight? I almost lose when she shot me with one of her spells. She did what? So we decided to have a hunting competition on the 10th floor. A hunting competition? Just what had Haruki got himself into? In the middle of the gate headed for the 10th floor, Haruki crouched down completely with his face looking through his knees, completely perplexed. So I decided to look after Karen. So, you say huh? Look after Karen? Yeah. Karen is a sponsor candidate for Iakaibashi. Say what? Haruki froze on the spot after hearing Akane's words. Chapter 59.3 59 Part 3 updated from novel by N.com. Corporate sponsorships were selected among those with the highest number of blog readers and the highest adventurer points. It is said that the numbers they generally look for are around 5,000. However, Karen's mere 1,000 bookmarks shouldn't be enough. Still, having a low number of bookmarks didn't mean one would never be scouted. Even if your ranking numbers are low, any adventurer may be scouted as long as they have something special going on for them. Karen was one such adventurer. But still, to learn that Karen of all people got scouted. Haruki's chest was filled with muddy emotions. He felt so envious of her. An adventurer who didn't appear in the rankings had a contract with a company. It didn't sound quite right to Haruki. A sponsorship? Huh? That's great. She's still just a candidate. though. Was it her magic? Yup. Akane promptly answered Haruki's question. Just as Haruki guessed, Akane seemed to have chosen Karen out of her rare ability to use magic. Supporting Karen and analyzing her magic to provide feedback to other adventurers could prove to be very profitable. This was a very correct decision for any company to make. Her being just a candidate could be due to the fact that she was still rather inexperienced, and also, little was known about magic, so that could be another reason for that. What is it? Haruki was staring fixedly at Akane. She didn't feel they were taking advantage of Karen. He could almost see her counting coins, though. Akane was a business person after all. Counting money and calculating profits was her everyday life. Her eyes were set on the profits. But there was nothing about how she felt about Karen at a personal level. That's what Haruki could read from staring at Akane's face. What's wrong with you? Did you fall in love with me or something? Shut up or I'll knock the lights out of you. I don't condone violence. Just as Haruki could feel his blood boil inside his veins, Akane tearfully hid her head behind her arms. Why was she so eager to provoke people around when she was such a crybaby? So far, Karen had never used her magic in front of others, except for Haruki. She had been very diligent and never made a mistake in that regard. So he had assumed that Karen would be very careful about using her magic. Haruki was surprised to hear that Karen had used her magic in front of someone else. Despite this, she must have had a very good reason for doing that. However, it seemed it had nothing to do with anything bad happening, so at least Haruki could be a bit relieved about that. Could this have anything to do with Karen's special skill, luck? With Yakibashi's support, Karen should have an easier time from now on. It may not be long before her blog starts filling up with posts about magic. That's great, Karen. I'm sorry, you've helped me all this time and now only I get to. She seemed ashamed of having been selected as a sponsor candidate. Karen apologetically lowered her head. In Karen's eyes, she had become stronger because Haruki had been supporting her. But Haruki felt he hadn't been that supportive at all. She simply had the desire to become stronger. Haruki could sympathize with that will of hers, if only a bit. If not for her will, she would have never grown this strong. Even though he had improved his skills, he had been swayed by her sheer power. Don't worry about that. So, Akane, is there any way you can help me? Nope. Give it up. You don't have that many blog readers yourself, don't you? That hit him right in the chest so hard that it made him stagger. He had timidly asked that question, but Akane's answer had been so blunt that it threw Haruki off. Yakibashi puts their sponsored adventurers in billboards, you know. No matter how many of those they put across the city, if they featured you, I don't think people would want to look at them. But rather than put you on a billboard, they'd put your face on an ad balloon and send it far away. You know? Gah! Way to kick a man while he's on the ground. She had no mercy at all. Haruki was a bit envious of Karen, but not enough for it to be considered jealousy. Haruki's goal wasn't to become a sponsored adventurer, or even a ranker for that matter. All he wanted to do was to become an adventurer. It was as simple as that. To become popular enough to be recognized by others. To earn fame, fortune and renown. Those things were not important to Haruki. Having arrived at the 10th floor, Haruki left the gate room and bravely proceeded forward. Still, hey, aren't you coming? As opposed to Haruki, Karen and Akane were trembling and wouldn't dare step outside of the gate room. They were holding their hands together tightly. This wasn't a manifestation of a friendship that was powerful enough to ease their fears. They were holding each other so that the other one wouldn't escape. It really looked more like an unsightly rivalry. This whole time, Haruki had been asking them just what happened when they first came to the 10th floor by themselves. But no matter how many times he asked, their mouths were so tightly shut that he could barely hear anything out of them. He carefully looked around the 10th floor, but couldn't find anything similar to a monster parade. Apparently the situation here hadn't become as rough as it did back in Chikaho. That alone made Haruki a bit less alert about this whole deal. Unlike Chikaho, the garage dungeon has food monsters appearing every 2 floors. If that rule hadn't changed, then the 10th floor is a food monster floor. Haruki didn't really think there should be something out there on that floor that could frighten those two as much as they were. A few moments later, Haruki's detection reacted to a monster's presence. He quickly readied up his weapon and stood there, waiting. Well, Let's see what kind of monster appears. The grass moved as if squirming around. Just as Haruki was getting ready, a single monster appeared out of the waist-tall grass. Chapter 60.1 60 Part 1 Let's be an adventurer. Defeating dungeons with a skill board 60. Let's enjoy a local delicacy. Just as Haruki was getting ready, a single monster appeared out of the waist-tall grass. An earthworm? The monster that appeared in front of him looked like an earthworm, though similar in color. It was about 2 meters tall. In proportion, it seemed thicker and shorter than a regular earthworm. Kaya, Naoya, Karen and Akane screamed behind Haruki when the monster showed up. It seemed that they didn't like to come across monsters like these. But was this one really that disgusting? Haruki tilted his head as if puzzled. If you took a good look at it, the monster looked almost even cute. Haruki attacked the earthworm-like monster. His attack, which had been strong enough to defeat the last monster parade and that lizardman, easily cut through the monster's skin. Its skin wasn't hard, rather, it was quite elastic. If he had attacked with a blunt weapon, damage would have certainly been reduced by it. And it might be able to even repel blades, if the wielder's skill isn't high enough. Haruki kept on making these observations while attacking the monster. The monster raised its tail. Was it trying to counterattack? When he tried to avoid it, the monster spit out a transparent fluid from its mouth. The fluid stuck to Haruki like seaweed, restricting his movements. It was sticky and oily to the touch. Haruki's face bent in disgust, but his nose twitched. It smelled like a rocky beach. Why? The smell of seashore stimulated Haruki's hippocampus. His nerves quickly made the connection and the memory was instantly revived! Having realized the monster's true nature, Haruki attacked it with all his might. Rapidly moving his 2 daggers, Haruki quickly sliced up the monster. The monster's fluids and internal organs popped out of the sliced monster and made a loud noise as they fell on the floor. Kaya, Naoya, Karen and Akane screamed behind Haruki after hearing those noises made by the recently defeated monster. Despite this, Haruki's detection captured the presence of another monster. Reinforcements, perhaps? He quickly turned around. However, what are you waiting for? Step forward. Why me? Aren't you a frontline fighter, Akane? It's not that I'm disgusted by that worm, it's just I don't mind restraining myself if it means it'll help you grow stronger. Basically admitting it. But if I were to fight, then you won't level up. So you go ahead. Akane and Karen were pushing each other to face the newly appeared monster. Then, using her sheer physical strength, Akane managed to force Karen to step ahead. Seeing that, Haruki's tension suddenly went down. She stopped after taking 2 steps forward. Just what was she going to do against that monster? Haruki had grown much stronger after defeating the monster parade and the lizardman in Chikaho. Because of that, monsters in the garage dungeon at this level didn't pose much of a threat to him. However, Karen was different. It was hard to believe that she had become as strong as Haruki, considering he has a passive skill that accelerates his growth. They should have been paying attention to the monster, though. While Karen and Akane were arguing, the second earthworm-like monster had gotten closer to them. Kaya, Naoya, oh well. Haruki figured he should probably help them. But at that moment, the sound of air collapsing echoed all around. Having seen Karen's magic, so much had happened that Haruki was unable to move. After receiving a direct hit from Karen's magic, the monster lay twitching on the floor. A faint white smoke was rising from its body. What Haruki had seen just now was definitely Karen's magic, but it was very different from what it used to be. Before heading to Sapporo at Kagemitsu's request, Karen's magic used to be nothing but white lumps, no matter how much she would charge it up. But things were different now. Her magic was now like thunder, a lightning-like thin stream of energy that traveled through the air and hit the monster directly. But this change wasn't just for looks. Its speed had increased so much it was almost scary. It was exactly like a blitz. Did an elemental attribute appear on her magic? A swift numbness spread from the center of Haruki's body across his entire body. That's amazing, Karen. Haruki approached her while trembling with emotion. As for Karen, the one who had cast that powerful magic, looking at the monster, which was still twitching on the floor and with white smoke rising from its body, she turned her eyes to him. Akane let a bitter smile float on her face as she saw that happen. There were many things he wanted to ask her, but oh well. After putting his doubts away for the moment, Haruki finished off the monster. It's all right now, Karen. After the battle was over, Karen's face went pale as she turned around and cowered, all scrunched up on the ground. "Hey, are you okay?" "I'm okay." She was not okay at all. Her voice said she was, but her heart said otherwise. "You can fight these things pretty well, huh, Karaboshi? These things? These are food too, you know." You eat earthworms?" "Yuck." He could feel the chill coming from Aken's cold stare. Haruki shook his head in denial. "There are edible worms in this world, you know." "Why are you talking about this now?" Aken's eyes were fixed on him. It would be dangerous to speak any further. Haruki felt his life was at stake, and quickly swallowed his words. "These are rent earthworms? They're spoonworms." "Spoonworms?" "Yeah, they're said to be very tasty. Actually, spoonworms are creatures that often wash ashore onto the beach the day after a storm. The source of this content: November Lbn. They're a delicacy that can be found in several places in Hokkaido, such as Hamamatsu. They're often regarded as a strange or low-quality product because of their appearance. But they're also said to be extremely delicious. Haruki had never mentioned them because they were not in circulation. He had always wanted to try them at least once. Excited, Haruki lifted the skin of the defeated spoonworm. It looked like a fat earthworm, but its contents were nothing but water and internal organs. When sliced up and cooked, it looks like grilled intestines. Chapter 60.2 60 Part 2. What exactly does it taste like? While imagining its taste, Haruki lifted the spoonworm high up and turned it inside out. "Ugh!" As Karen groaned, Haruki quickly decided to put the spoonworm away in his backpack. Karen looked as if she was ready to throw it away as garbage, though. After receiving the magic bag from Karen, he stored the spoonworm inside. In the end, the 10th floor was a food floor, where food monsters appeared. Knowing that, Haruki rubbed his chest in relief and hunted more spoonworms to his heart's content. "So can you really eat these?" "That's right." Having previously obtained hot stones, Haruki decided to use them to grill the spoonworms in a brazier. The only reason Akane was nearby was so that she could learn how to use those magical heating tools. It was by no means to share in Haruki's meal. However, she had her personal chopsticks in her hand, which she had brought with her from who knows where. She might have been planning to eat at some point. "You don't have to eat if you don't want to, it's fine." "Never mind me. There's so much of it already that I ought to try a bit at least." "Don't you know the saying, those who do not work, do not eat?" The only ones who hunted the spoonworms were Haruki and Karen. Akane hadn't killed a single spoonworm. It wasn't because she hadn't been able to fight. Even if she fought, she wouldn't have been able to defeat the spoonworms. That is not to say that Akane was weak. Rather, despite being startled and crying during the fight, her movements were swift and strong. Haruki had been watching her the whole time. However, when Akane was busy fighting with a spoonworm, another spoonworm would appear from behind her. That second spoonworm would then gulp her up from her head. That happened several times during the fight. According to Karen, Akane had been swallowed by the spoonworms one too many times for a day's worth. So in short, Akane hadn't been able to defeat a single spoonworm. Or had she? The source of this content: November Lbn. To Haruki, Akane seemed to be letting herself get swallowed by the spoonworms on purpose. It was certainly a strange way to attract the monster's attention. He was about to ask her about it, but Akane seemed to notice his intention and put her index finger in front of her mouth, as if asking him to shut up. Her eyes were filled with a strong light like he had never seen before. Got it. There must have been some point to her doing that. Having guessed as much, Haruki simply decided to leave it to Akane. That had surely been necessary in order to help Karen grow stronger. Haruki couldn't understand why it had been necessary to do it like that, though. "Hey, it's getting burned there." "Hey, come on, turn it over." This girl. Disappointed, Haruki turned the spoonworms over so they wouldn't burn. When exposed to heat in a brazier, the spoonworms bent backwards. The scent of the grilled spoonworms crawled into Haruki's nostrils, causing his mouth to overflow with saliva. It was a wonderful smell reminiscent of a beach. Haruki's stomach began to growl as if urging the worms to be ready. "Hey, Karen, these are already done, so you can have them first." "Ah, thank you very much." "Hey, those are mine, aren't they?" Was someone who wasn't a team member and didn't help with the harvesting entitled to enjoy the meal afterwards? "If you want to eat, then hunt spoonworms. Then you can eat as many as you want." "Hey, come on, don't say that, or Kamoa-un. Haruki kept on roasting spoon worms while ignoring Akane. Since they were eating, Haruki took off his mask and put it aside. Akane then pointed at the mask and began to talk. "Well, look at you. It seems you have an unexpectedly impressive presence. I mean, Haruki." "Cut it out, you." That was enough. That wasn't Haruki. It was just a mask. Haruki began to ignore Akane even more. "Well, here goes nothing." Karen takes a bite of her serving of grilled spoon worms. Her face was a bit stiff at first, but after taking that first bite, her face loosened up instantly. Even after having gulped down the spoon worm, her face was in a state of daze. It seemed as if it had been the tastiest thing she had ever eaten in her life. When someone eats something really tasty, they often say something much like "it's delicious," or "this is great." While overcome with surprise, as he watched Karen's blissful facial expression, Haruki took his first bite. The words wouldn't come out. Haruki was unable to say a single word. It was crunchy, and its taste spread through his entire mouth every time he chewed. It tasted like milk mussels, but its texture was different. That texture greatly enhanced the spoon worm's taste. To think that the people of Hamamatsu had this kind of food all to themselves. How inexcusable of them. Haruki and Karen keep digging into their servings. Even if they wanted to stop eating, their chopsticks wouldn't stop bringing food to their mouths. But they didn't even want to stop. All they wanted to do was to keep tasting that delicious flavor for another second before taking another bite. But there was no use wishing for that. The stars started to appear in the sky, and the air became chilly as the sun started to recede. And that whole time, "My serving, where's my serving?" The only sound that could be heard across the rural field was the wailing of the one person who could not enjoy a single serving of spoon worms. Muscle is power. I'm back safely. Hey everyone, long time no see. It's me, your favorite muscle, Bacon. With Masatsuga's help, I was able to escape the maze in Shinjuku Station. I appreciate everyone's concern. Since I've been in a constantly pumped-up state, I ended up losing some body fat. Thanks to that, my muscles look sharper now. Are you all exercising properly? If you do, your muscles will never betray you when you need them most. Well then, I have been able to deal with a lot of monsters until now. I'm ready to go back to my usual self. So hold your fists tight. Hold them up in the air. Doesn't it make you feel pumped up? Time to flex. That's right. Let's get pumped up and take Shinjuku back. Hustle muscle.